Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case, the case of Doreen Herbert. Doreen Herbert was born on November 29, 1952, in California. She grew up in a very large family of 5 children. Her kindness and desire to help others defined her as a person. After college, she moved to San Francisco, where she worked as a physiotherapist. Doreen also nurtured a dream of creating her own large family. This aspiration became a reality when she met Michael Dennis, who worked near her clinic. They began dating, got married, and in 1976, their son Paul was born. Initially, Michael and Doreen were happy, but the birth of their child marked the beginning of their marital troubles. A year later, they decided to go their separate ways, with their son staying with Doreen and Michael receiving regular visitation rights. Doreen and her family were still able to maintain a fairly stable life despite the many hardships they faced. She met Charles, and they started dating, eventually getting married and settling in a quiet neighborhood in San Jose. They was thrilled when their daughter Diana was born in 1979. Charles was eager to be a father and was delighted to welcome Diana, raising her alongside Doreen's son from a previous relationship. Tragedy struck in February 1980 when disaster befell their young family. 4-year-old Paul slipped through the fence surrounding their backyard pool and fell into the water. Doreen, who was at home at the time, discovered what had happened too late. She immediately pulled Paul from the water and called for emergency services. Paul was rushed to the hospital and connected to life support, but after 10 agonizing days, the medical team concluded that he had no chance of recovery. The heartbreaking decision was made to disconnect Paul from life support. Doreen was heartbroken and consumed by guilt, despite the police investigation clearing her of any blame. However, with the help of her young daughter, she slowly began to heal. For years after the traumatic event, the family finally received some good news. After 2 previous miscarriages, Doreen became pregnant again, and this time, everything seemed to be going smoothly. They was expecting a baby boy, due to arrive in early November. Just days before Doreen's scheduled hospital visit, the family decided to participate in Halloween festivities. On the evening of October 31st, the neighborhood was filled with decorated homes, children trick-or-treating, and parents handing out candy. Diana, now 4 years old, was excited to join in and her parents agreed. Although Doreen was 9 months pregnant, she accompanied her daughter on the trick-or-treating adventure, while Charles stayed home to hand out candy to other children. Charles and his wife, Doreen, had returned home from taking their daughter trick-or-treating. Just before 9 p.m., noticing they were running low on candy, Charles decided to make a quick trip to the nearby store to restock. At around 8:50 p.m., he left the house, leaving his wife and daughter behind. 15 minutes later, he returned home to find the front door slightly ajar, which seemed suspicious. As he entered the house, he was met with a horrific scene. His wife, Doreen, lay on the floor in the corridor, surrounded by a large amount of blood and showed no signs of life. Charles immediately called 911. In the living room, he then found the body of their unborn child. Charles was in shock, struggling to comprehend what he was seeing. At first he wondered if Doreen had had a miscarriage, but he quickly realized that something much more serious had happened. Next to their unborn child lay Doreen's severed hand, making it clear to Charles that his family had been attacked. Fearing for his daughter's safety, he frantically searched for her. There was so much blood on the floor that he slipped and fell while running through the house. Eventually, he found his daughter hiding behind the sofa in the living room. She is still alive and unhurt. When paramedics arrived, they found Doreen's weak pulse and rushed her to the hospital. Tragically, Doreen did not survive and was pronounced dead in the ambulance. Her unborn child also did not survive. The attacker had inflicted severe injuries on the baby after removing it from Doreen's womb. A post-mortem examination revealed that Doreen had been stabbed multiple times with a long, sharp object, possibly a sword or machete. The crime scene was particularly disturbing, with blood covering the floors, walls, and ceiling. Police officers at the scene were deeply affected by what they witnessed. Despite a thorough search of the house, no signs of the perpetrator or any evidence were found. However, investigators did discover bloody footprints leading from the house to the middle of the road, suggesting that the killer may have escaped in a vehicle. Soon, investigators found another crucial piece of evidence on the lawn in front of the house, a wolf mask covered in blood. They believed it might belong to the killer, as Charles reported they didn't own such a mask. The evidence was sent to the laboratory for analysis. And police attempted to question Diana, who was the only witness in this incident. Although shaken and in complete shock, Diana provided valuable details about what happened. She explained that shortly after her father left for the store, someone knocked on their door. When Doreen answered, she saw a man wearing a wolf mask and holding a long blade. He threatened to kill her, and Doreen immediately screamed at Diana to run out of the house. Diana hid behind the sofa but couldn't recall what happened next until her father found her. Initially, the police found it suspicious that the victim's husband, Charles, had left for the store just minutes before the killer arrived. This coincidence led investigators to consider him as a potential suspect. When Charles returned home, he unknowingly stepped on blood multiple times, even falling and getting covered in it. Despite this, Diana was unable to help identify the attacker due to the wolf mask. Police initially considered the possibility that Charles might have intentionally gotten blood on his clothes to create an alibi. However, detectives quickly discovered several inconsistencies in this theory. Firstly, Charles's shoes did not match the bloody footprints found on the street. Secondly, the killer likely escaped in a car parked in front of the house, but no blood was found in Charles's vehicle, nor was a different pair of shoes discovered. To investigate further, police went to the store that Charles had visited that evening and spoke to the staff there. They confirmed that Charles had indeed purchased candy from him. This established an alibi for Charles, as he didn't have enough time to commit the murder. Surveillance footage from the store supported Charles's account, leading detectives to temporarily rule him out as the prime suspect. They then asked Charles if he knew of anyone who might want to harm his family. Charles immediately pointed out Michael, Doreen's ex-husband. According to Charles, Michael's behavior changed dramatically after the death of their son, who had drowned in the pool. Michael blamed Doreen for the boy's death, believing she had deliberately killed Paul to cut ties with him. Michael filed a lawsuit against his ex-wife Doreen, holding her responsible for the death of Paul, but lost the case. Their marriage had been troubled even before their divorce. After the birth of their son, Michael's behavior became increasingly erratic, often withdrawing into depression and distancing himself from his family. Doreen suspected that Michael's childhood traumas were to blame. As a child, Michael had hearing problems and wore a bulky hearing aid, which earned him constant teasing from his peers. This led to him growing up as an introvert with few friends and a fear of interacting with women. Although his relationship with Doreen seemed to have helped him overcome these issues, they eventually resurfaced and contributed to their decision to divorce. When Doreen married Charles, Michael began to resent her, particularly for the fact that another man was raising his son. These feelings became even worse after Paul's death, made Michael hate his ex-wife even more. Michael has also been unemployed for a long time, which had a significant impact on him. After considering this information, the detectives decided to visit Michael's house to speak with him. Although Charles's statement alone was not enough to make Michael the main suspect, the fact that Michael lived only 2 miles from Doreen's house prompted the detectives to pay him a visit immediately. The officers arrived at Michael's home around midnight and noticed a pickup truck parked near the garage. When police shined their flashlights on Michael's car, they saw blood on the steering wheel and keys. They knocked on the door, but no one answered. Lights were still on inside the house and they could hear running water, leading them to suspect that Michael might be destroying evidence or washing bloody clothes. They continued knocking until Michael opened the door. Michael remained calm, even after being informed Doreen's murder. Michael answered the officers' questions calmly and allowed them to enter his house without a warrant. He claimed that he had gone to the store earlier that day, returned home, and hadn't left since. He even agreed to sign a form allowing the police to search his home. However, as he reached for the pen to sign, officers noticed a deep cut on his right hand. Michael explained that he had accidentally cut himself while carving a pumpkin for Halloween, but the police were skeptical of his story. The wound was fresh, with blood still seeping out. As officers searched the house, Michael accompanied one of them upstairs to retrieve his ID. However, when Michael reached for the bed headboard, the officer intervened, sensing suspicious behavior. Why would Michael store his documents behind the bed? Curiosity led the police to conduct a deeper investigation. Upon approaching the bed, they spotted a holster attached to the headboard, containing a loaded gun. The officer confiscated the weapon and escorted Michael downstairs to the other officers. Meanwhile, the officers discovered a trail of blood droplets leading from the house to the garage. And they found a washing machine and a pile of clothes with bloodstains. This evidence is enough to arrest Michael. A thorough search of the house by detectives and forensic experts followed, seeking evidence that might link Michael to the murder. Although the blood analysis would take a few days, the police made some disturbing discoveries. They found an empty box for an 18-inch machete. Medical experts confirmed that the wounds from this knife matched the actual wounds found on Doreen's body. During the investigation, police found 2 makeshift coffins in Michael's house, leading them to believe that he was planning to harm his ex-wife, Doreen, and her husband. The presence of medical body bags at his home was also suspicious. As detectives pieced together the evidence, they went to a judge to request a warrant for Michael's arrest. However, due to a lack of concrete evidence, they were initially only able to hold him for a limited time. When the judge refused to issue an arrest warrant, citing insufficient circumstantial evidence to convict Michael, he was released from prison. But detectives eventually got vital information from the autopsy results. Experts discovered that the crime scene had blood from 2 individuals. One blood type was identified as Doreen's, and the other was Michael's. This evidence suggested that Michael had likely injured himself while attacking Doreen. With this new evidence, the judge quickly issued a warrant for Michael's arrest, charged him with the murder of Doreen and her unborn child. In addition, detectives discovered that Michael owned a wolf mask identical to the one found near Doreen's house the previous Halloween. Further inquiry revealed that Michael had worn the mask to a party, and a photograph of him wearing it was even obtained by police. To validate this, detectives searched Michael's home and found the same clothing he wore in the photo. To search for new clues to the case, the police interviewed Doreen's neighbors about the incidents that happened that night. Several children who were trick-or-treating reported seeing a man wearing a wolf mask standing across from Doreen's house, eyeing it intensely. This sighting occurred around 7 p.m., a full 2 hours before the murder. Michael's trial commenced in July 1988, 4 years after the crime. He initially pleaded guilty but later changed his plea to not guilty by reason of insanity. A psychologist evaluated Michael and diagnosed him with severe mental health issues. Michael claimed that the horror of Halloween was too much to bear, as the sight of children trick-or-treating reminded him of his own loss and triggered a mental breakdown. He alleged that this breakdown led him to visit Doreen's house armed with a machete on the evening of the murder. When Doreen opened the door, Michael revealed his true identity as the man behind the mask and made a shocking statement: "She killed their son." Recognizing the man as Michael, Doreen quickly screamed for her daughter to run and Michael immediately attacked her. Michael claimed he was unaware that Doreen was pregnant at the time of the attack, but this assertion was met with skepticism. Doreen was visibly pregnant, standing at 4 feet 1 inches tall, and her friends found it hard to believe that Michael wouldn't have noticed, especially given her prominent belly. In fact, her friends joked that her pregnancy had made her almost as wide as she was tall. The prosecution argued that Michael was fully aware of his actions and had planned the crime in advance, a claim supported by evidence from the investigation. Detectives discovered that Michael had previously shared his desire to kill his ex-wife and her husband with friends, and had even discussed disposing of their bodies in the bay. The presence of 2 coffins and body bags in his home suggested that he was serious about carrying out this plan, and the prosecution argued that he had adjusted his intentions for some reason to target Doreen instead. Michael may have panicked or feared being caught, prompting him to leave the house quickly. During the trial, Doreen's 9-year-old daughter, Diana, testified about what she witnessed. Charles had wanted to spare his daughter the traumatic experience, but she was the only witness to the crime. The trial lasted a year, ultimately resulting in Michael's conviction for the murders of Doreen and her unborn child. Michael was sentenced to death, but a moratorium on the death penalty in California delayed his execution. As a result, Michael remains in prison, and his sentence will be no carried out. Years later, Diana revealed that the murder had such a profound effect on her, and she could never forget the horror she witnessed. Ultimately, Diana decides to forgive Michael and try to move past the past to focus on the future. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lisa Harnum. Lisa Cecilia Harnum was born on June 12, 1981, in the Toronto suburbs of Canada, as the second child in her family. She was raised alongside her older brother Jason, with whom she has always been very close. Their single mother, Joanna, brought them up independently. Since their father left the family when they were very young and played no further role in their lives, Lisa and her brother had no memories of him. From an early age, Lisa grew up to be an active and purposeful girl. She participated in sports with her brother, attended martial arts classes, and enjoyed playing soccer and volleyball. However, her true passion was ballet, which she practiced at the dance studio for several hours daily. As a tall and slender child, Lisa's professional ballet training required a strict diet, which unfortunately had a detrimental effect on her growing body. During adolescence, Lisa developed anorexia as a result of her eating disorders. For a long time, she kept her problem hidden, believing she could overcome it alone. However, when her weight dropped to critically low levels, her mother intervened and had Lisa hospitalized for several months to recover and gain weight. After graduating, she pursued dancing classes and decided to enter the beauty industry. Alongside her university studies, she worked as a perfumer at a large cosmetics chain store, and in her free time, studied makeup and hairdressing techniques. When she turned 24, Lisa moved to Australia in 2005, driven by a desire for drastic change. She wanted to escape to a warmer climate and explore the world. On a 1-year work visa, Lisa traveled to another continent. Her mother, Joanna, accompanied her for the first few months to ensure a smooth transition. Once satisfied that her daughter was settled, Joanna returned to Toronto, confident that Lisa could take care of herself. Lisa settled in Sydney, renting a cozy apartment, and soon landed a job at a small local cosmetology company. Once her visa expired, she made the decision to make Australia her permanent home. To achieve this, she first extended her stay for another year, and then began preparing the necessary documents required to obtain Australian citizenship. Lisa faced challenges in her personal life, partly due to her preference for older men, possibly stemming from her absent father figure. In 2006, she started a romance with a coworker nearly twice her age at Sydney Cosmetics. They moved in together, and her family approved. They traveled extensively, but eventually broke up a year after their engagement, with the age difference likely a factor. In 2010, Lisa graduated from the Sydney College of Stylists and landed a job as a hairdresser at a popular beauty salon, where she swiftly earned the respect of her colleagues and the trust of her clients. Around the same time, she started dating a new boyfriend, but their romance was short-lived after Lisa discovered he was married. Refusing to get involved in destroying someone else's family, she ended the relationship promptly. Before that, at a party, her boyfriend had introduced her to his friend, Simon Gitney, a businessman. This chance encounter would ultimately prove disastrous for Lisa. Born in December 1973 in Maryland, Simon Gitney came from a large, religious family of Lebanese immigrants. Raised alongside 5 siblings in a strict, obedient household, Simon struggled to control his emotions and anger from a young age. He was possessive, intolerant of rejection, and prone to violent outbursts, which eventually led to serious legal troubles. At 18, Simon Gitney was first incarcerated for harassing his ex-girlfriend at her workplace. The store owner intervened, but Simon returned with friends, assaulted the owner, and was subsequently arrested. Due to good behavior, he only served a few months before being released on bail. 3 years later, Simon was arrested again, this time for theft. He resisted arrest, engaged in a violent struggle, and bit off a policeman's earlobe. Although he faced a severe prison sentence, the pastor of the Lebanese Christian church, which his family belonged to, intervened on his behalf. As a result, Simon served only a year and a half in prison. In 2000, Simon was arrested for drugs. He served 2 years of a 4-year sentence. After his release, Simon transformed his life. He co-founded a luxury shoe business, invested in real estate and a premium car, and hid his criminal past from others. Simon and Lisa exchanged numbers at a party and started chatting. When Lisa complained about her living situation, Simon offered her a free room in his apartment while she looked for a new place. Despite her mom's concerns, Lisa moved in, thinking Simon might be gay due to his appearance and piercings. They lived separately for months, but grew closer over time, and a romance blossomed. Simon, 37, and Lisa, 28, were a couple. To Lisa, Simon seemed like a charming prince from a fairy tale. He was outgoing, cheerful, and lavished his love with gifts and surprises. They went everywhere together, including the elite sports club, which Simon had been attending for years. Lisa thought she had found her soulmate and would live happily ever after with him. She couldn't stop talking about him to her mom, brother, and friends, unaware that their fairy tale was about to come to an end. Simon's behavior changed 6 months in, but Lisa didn't notice. He distanced her from friends and family, erased her boundaries, and tried to control her views and tastes. He convinced her to quit her job at a beauty salon where she was happy by throwing a scene and forcing her resignation. A month and a half after that, the couple relocated to a luxurious 15th-floor apartment in an elite residential complex. Unbeknownst to Lisa, the apartment was heavily equipped with hidden surveillance cameras. Simon gifted Lisa an expensive smartphone and laptop, pre-installed with spyware that enabled him to monitor her messages, emails, and calls, as well as track her every move. He also gained access to her social media accounts, giving him the power to delete friends, posts, and photos at will. Katani's control over Lisa's life intensified daily, but he cleverly made it seem as though Lisa was voluntarily complying with his demands. He had invaded every aspect of her life, eliminating any semblance of privacy. Katani dictated Lisa's appearance, forbidding her from wearing makeup, claiming it made her look tacky, and instead bought her dull gray and black clothing, discarding her old outfits as too revealing. He restricted her movements, only allowing her to leave the apartment accompanied by him, and solely visiting places of his choice. He even banned her from going to the gym, instead purchasing expensive exercise machines, citing that she could now work out from home. Lisa's social media friend lists were shrinking daily, and Ghani finally convinced her to delete her accounts. With no friends left in real life, all her contacts and calls were closely monitored by Simon, who only allowed her to communicate with her mother and brother. During her last visit home in December 2010, Lisa decided to fly to Canada to spend Christmas with her family. Simon had planned to accompany her, but his urgent business matters prevented him from doing so. Despite initial reservations, he eventually agreed to let her travel alone, provided she adhered to his strict rules and conditions. When Lisa arrived, Jason and Joanna were astonished by the drastic changes they saw in her. She was a shadow of her former bright and cheerful self, now devoid of makeup, with her luxurious hair hidden under a headdress and dressed in unflattering all-black attire. However, it was the internal changes that were truly alarming. Lisa would flinch at every phone ring, instantly grabbing the receiver, as per Simon's instruction to answer calls immediately, regardless of the time or her activities. During her stay at her mother's house, Lisa refused to see friends and rarely ventured out. Joanna was shocked by her daughter Lisa's behavior and decided to talk to her. Lisa broke down, revealing that Simon controls her life, tracking her every move and restricting her freedom. He doesn't let her work, see friends, or pursue hobbies. Joanna was horrified, urging Lisa to stay in Canada, but Lisa insisted she loved Simon and believed he'd eventually calm down. Despite her family's pleas to stay, Lisa decided to move back to Australia to be with Simon, disregarding their warnings that the relationship was unhealthy. She reassured her mother that everything would be fine, saying Simon loved her and wouldn't harm her. However, after her return, the situation deteriorated significantly. Simon restricted her from leaving the apartment, and when they went out together, he demanded that she keep her eyes fixed on her feet, avoiding eye contact with other men. Moreover, he started calling her Cecilia, her second name, as he believed it was more respectable. In the spring of 2011, Lisa started complaining about pain in her leg, an old injury from her youth when she took ballet classes. Instead of taking her to the hospital, Ghani hired a female physical therapist to give Lisa massages 3 times a week at their home. The therapist soon became Lisa's closest friend and confidant, and Lisa openly shared her concerns about her difficult situation with her. On June 12th, Simon organized a birthday party for Lisa at the most expensive restaurant in Sydney, but the guest list only included his relatives and close friends. Lisa wasn't allowed to invite anyone she wanted, making it an isolating celebration. At the end of the evening, Simon proposed to Lisa by putting a ring on her finger. She accepted, but her tears were not of happiness. Instead, they were tears of desperation and hopelessness, noticeable to everyone present. Back home, Lisa called her mother and tearfully shared the news of her engagement. However, her mother, Joanna, was not pleased with the announcement. She tried to convince Lisa to end the relationship and return to Canada as soon as possible. Lisa asked her mother to avoid discussing this over the phone, as she had already realized that her fiancé, Simon, was eavesdropping on their conversations. Lisa attempted to focus on the upcoming wedding and started making plans. When she tried to discuss the details with Simon, he curtly dismissed her, informing her that he would select the venue, choose her dress, and create the guest list. Lisa felt utterly powerless, having no say in the matter. During a subsequent physiotherapy session, Lisa confessed that she couldn't continue like this, but felt trapped because Simon refused to let her go. The physiotherapist and Lisa devised a plan. At each session, Lisa would secretly pass some of her belongings to the therapist for safekeeping, all while ensuring Simon remained unaware of her actions. On July 28th, Simon rushed out of the house, leaving his laptop behind, which was unusual for him since he always carried it with him. Lisa seized the opportunity to investigate, and her worst suspicions were confirmed. She discovered a spyware program on the laptop, which Simon had used to obtain all her phone data and recordings of her conversations with her mother. Even more disturbingly, she found surveillance footage from the security cameras installed in every room of their apartment. On the same day, Lisa used her physical therapist's phone to call her mother and begged her to take the next available flight to come and rescue her from the apartment. However, Joanna couldn't drop everything immediately. She needed time to arrange a shift swap with a colleague. In hindsight, Joanna would always regret this delay. Back home, Simon quickly realized that his fiancée had discovered the spyware on his laptop. Lisa broke down in tears, trying to understand why Simon would do such a thing, but he justified his actions by claiming they were for her own good. On July 29th, an intense conversation took place between the young couple, a recording of which would later be presented in court. Lisa was overcome with emotion and asked to leave, but Simon remained calm and assured her that this would never happen, suggesting that she was suffering from mental health issues. On the morning of July 30th, 2011, Lisa woke up early, got dressed, and gathered her important documents and belongings in her purse. She locked herself in the bathroom and made a final phone call to her mother, warning her that if anything bad happened to her, it would be Simon's fault. It seemed Lisa was attempting to sneak out of the apartment while Simon slept, but unfortunately she was unsuccessful. What happened next is unclear, but according to neighbors, they heard a scream in the hallway. However, before they could react, the noise abruptly stopped, and exactly a minute later, a young woman fell to her death from the 15th floor balcony. Passers-by on the street also heard the scream and saw the body falling from a great height, but they didn't have time to understand what was happening. A man walking his dog that morning, who was closest to the scene, heard a noise and looked up. He saw a man holding something large, which he then threw down. When people arrived at the scene, they found a young woman lying on the ground, but despite their efforts, they couldn't help her. She died instantly, having suffered severe injuries. 3 minutes later, Ghani, still in his pajamas, ran out into the street, crying and saying he didn't know how he was going to live without his fiancée, claiming he hadn't caught her in time. At first, it seemed like an accident, but Ghani quickly claimed that his fiancée had intentionally ended her life. A note found in his pocket and a disturbing video suggested that something strange was going on. After the body was taken to the morgue and examined, a torn note was found in different pockets with the message, "There are cameras everywhere in the apartment." It's likely Lisa was afraid Simon would discover the note, so she ripped it into small pieces and scattered them among her pockets. An investigation revealed that indeed, multiple cameras were installed in the apartment, but the hard drive containing the recordings was nowhere to be found. Simon claimed that there were no video recordings at all. However, a surveillance camera in the communal hallway caught a disturbing scene. The short footage shows Lisa fleeing the apartment and calling for help, but Simon grabs her from behind, covers her mouth, and drags her back inside. This incident occurred just a minute before she fell off the balcony, and it was the scream that the neighbors heard. Ghani's laptop contained a recording of a conversation between Ghani and Lisa from the night before the tragedy, as well as spyware that Simon used to monitor his fiancée's activities. Simon claimed that he and Lisa had an argument that morning, during which she became hysterical and ran out into the hallway, screaming. He said he managed to bring her back inside because he didn't want to attract the attention of their neighbors. According to Simon, he then tried to call Lisa's mother, but she ran out to the balcony and jumped to her death just as he was doing so. Simon admitted that Lisa had previously threatened to take her own life, but he hadn't taken her warning seriously. Meanwhile, Ghani attributed the spyware on his laptop to Simon's supposed concern for Lisa's safety. During the trial, Simon was accompanied by Rachel Louise, a 22-year-old model who bore a striking resemblance to his late fiancée. However, it was later alleged that Rachel Louise was only using Simon to gain fame and attention, and that she willingly spoke to the press and appeared on TV to declare that Simon was incapable of harming a woman. Simon's lawyers attempted to persuade the court that Lisa was unstable, prone to outbursts, and potentially responsible for her own death, despite evidence of her long battle with anorexia and her treatment at a clinic. They also claimed that Simon, being shorter, would have been physically incapable of lifting Lisa, who was taller, or throwing her over the balcony. However, a gym trainer, who regularly saw Simon, testified that he was much stronger than he appeared and could easily have lifted Lisa, contradicting the defense's claims. This was further supported by the absence of Lisa's fingerprints on the railing and glass barrier, which suggested she could not have jumped without touching them. Additionally, the physiotherapist who had been confided in by Lisa and received her belongings in the hope of escaping her abusive relationship testified in court, providing crucial evidence. In the end, Ghani was found guilty of murdering his fiancée and sentenced to 26 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 18 years. After the verdict was announced, Rachel Louise became enraged and started insulting the judge, which led to her removal from the courtroom. Simon and his legal team attempted to appeal the court's decision, but all their efforts were unsuccessful, and the verdict stood. Following the verdict, Rachel ended her relationship with her boyfriend, citing in an interview that it was challenging to maintain a relationship while he was incarcerated, although she still believes he is innocent. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Emmett Corrigan. Ashley Harmon, a bright and energetic person, became a caretaker for her 5 siblings after her parents' divorce at age 9. Her strong faith as a devout Mormon gave her strength and comfort in tough times, helping her overcome obstacles with determination and courage. In 2003, Ashley, a human development major, met Emmett Corrigan, a philosophy student, while attending Utah State. Like Ashley, Emmett's parents divorced when he was 10, and he had a tough time coping with the aftermath. However, he eventually found comfort in the Mormon faith. Although Emmett wasn't born into the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, he converted to the church at 17 in a ceremony attended by his family and friends. Ashley initially thought Emmett was cute, and he felt the same way about her. Emmett was impressed by Ashley's intelligence and was immediately smitten with her from the moment they met. In fact, he confided in his closest friends that he knew Ashley was the one he wanted to marry. Emmett proposed to Ashley at Christmas 2008, and she happily accepted. They married in a Mormon temple, surrounded by shared beliefs. Overjoyed, they started their new life, finding stability and happiness in their union. In Mormonism, marriage is sacred and eternal, lasting beyond death, with divorce only allowed in extreme cases. Ashley and Emmett welcomed twin daughters in 2005, feeling overjoyed and thrilled to experience parenthood. While attending Utah State University, they balanced childcare and education, relying on faith and love to overcome challenges. Emmett graduated from Utah State University with honors in 2009, attended law school and passed the bar, becoming a bankruptcy attorney. Meanwhile, Ashley stayed home to care for their 4 kids, managing the household while Emmett built his career. Behind closed doors, their seemingly perfect life hid secrets. In August 2010, Emmett faced increasing pressure to provide for his family of 4 young children, all under the age of 5, as the financial burden became overwhelming. To improve his financial situation, Emmett decided to establish his own criminal defense law firm. A friend introduced him to Candy Hall, a reputable paralegal with prior experience working for a criminal attorney. Following a successful lunch meeting, Emmett hired Candy as an assistant for his criminal defense firm. Candy Hall's husband was not in the story. It was Robert Hall, the Emmett, who was a great dad and worker. When his wife, Ashley, got a job, he was thrilled. But as his business and family responsibilities grew, Ashley noticed a strain on their marriage. Robert coped with the pressure by working out excessively, often at inconvenient times, leaving Ashley to care for their 4 kids alone. On January 15, 2011, Ashley and Emmett had their 5th child, a son, despite their growing distance. However, Emmett's behavior towards their newborn was different from how he had behaved with their other children. Instead of being attentive, he started spending more and more time away, sometimes staying out overnight. Ashley confided in her sister that she was worried about Emmett's actions and suspected he might be cheating on her. Around the same time, Emmett's assistant, Candy Hall, was experiencing her own marital problems. She told a friend that her husband, Rob, was jealous of her working for the charismatic Emmett, and their constant fights were affecting their marriage. On their 7th wedding anniversary, March 6, 2011, Ashley was left alone with the children while Emmett claimed he was attending a bodybuilding convention. Ashley felt panicked and concerned about her marriage, wondering if she was doing something wrong that made Emmett unhappy. Although she was unhappy, Ashley was determined to work through their problems and make their marriage better, as divorce was not an option for her. Ashley decided to tackle the issue head-on. She planned a perfect evening to mend her relationship with Emmett, cooking his favorite meal and ensuring the kids were on their best behavior. But when he arrived 2 hours late, he turned away from her kiss. Undeterred, Ashley remained steadfast in her goal to rekindle their love, believing it was worth trying to. 2 hours after Ashley finished preparing dinner, the Corrigan family gathered around the table to eat. However, Emmett claimed he wasn't hungry, despite Ashley's obvious effort and attention to detail. It was clear she had invested a lot of time, thought, and love into the meal, but Emmett's lack of interest left Ashley feeling disappointed and hurt. As the rest of the family enjoyed their meal, Emmett suddenly got up, saying he needed to go to Walgreens. He promised to be right back, seeming not to notice Ashley's growing concern. Ashley suspected there was more to Emmett's actions and begged him to stay and connect with her, reminding him of their family's importance. However, Emmett responded harshly, telling Ashley not to dictate what he did. He then left the house, leaving Ashley feeling confused and hurt. On the same day, another issue was emerging in Emmett's life. His assistant Candy and her husband Rob Hall were at a crisis point in their marriage. Despite their love for each other, Rob was packing his belongings, deciding to leave their home, believing it was best to distance himself and start fresh. That evening, Rob phoned his daughter to ask if she was out driving Candy's car. She told him she wasn't. A few minutes later, his daughter drove past Walgreens and spotted Candy's car in the parking lot, but thought little of it. She immediately called her father to report her discovery. Rob's initial reaction was a casual, "Oh, okay." Little did they realize that this ordinary phone call was about to drastically change the course of two families' lives forever. Meanwhile, Ashley lay in bed, her heart heavy with worry, praying fervently for her marriage to succeed. She had been texting and calling Emmett desperately, trying to reach him, but he wasn't responding. Her intuition told her something was wrong, and she couldn't shake off a sense of unease. Around 1 p.m., a 911 call reported gunshots and a screaming woman in the Walgreens parking lot, prompting a rapid police response. As they arrived at the scene, officers were uncertain about what they would find. Had there been a random drive-by shooting, a botched drug deal, a robbery, or something entirely different? Without knowing what to expect, they approached the area with caution. When the first officer stepped out of the patrol car, he was met with a horrific scene. A lifeless body lay on the ground, and a second person, wounded and in agony, was clutching their head. The injured person was rushed to the hospital with a gunshot wound, leaving the police with more questions than answers. Amidst the chaos, one key witness caught the police's attention. Her name was Candy Hall, and she was present at the crime scene. At the hospital, Candy identified the injured man as her husband, Rob, and the deceased man as her boss, Emmett. The autopsy revealed that Emmett had been shot twice, once in the head and once in the chest. Shortly after Emmett's lifeless body was discovered in the Walgreens parking lot, his wife Ashley received a knock on her front door. When she answered, she was greeted by police officers who broke the devastating news. Her husband, Emmett, had been shot and killed. Ashley was left stunned, inconsolable, and bewildered, struggling to comprehend what could have led to this tragic event. After the police informed Ashley that her husband had been killed, a detective asked her about Rob and Candy Hall. Ashley knew Candy as Emmett's assistant, but she suspected that Candy and Emmett were having an affair. The police took Candy in for questioning from the Walgreens parking lot, trying to piece together what led to Emmett's murder and Rob being shot in the head. When detectives asked Candy if she had a romantic relationship with her boss Emmett, she denied it. They also asked if they had ever had sex, and Candy strongly denied that too. Candy told the detectives that she had gone to Walgreens that night to pick up a prescription. She claimed to have run into Emmett by chance in the store, and they decided to go for a drive in his car. As they drove to a gas station, Candy's phone rang. It was her estranged husband, Rob. Candy told Rob that she was out with Emmett, but the conversation turned sour when Rob became jealous and threatened to hurt Emmett. At long last, Candy and Emmett pulled up to Walgreens. As they got out of the car, Candy's heart sank when she saw Rob standing at the entrance, his face red with anger. The air was electric with tension as a fierce argument broke out between Rob and Emmett, which quickly escalated into a physical fight. Just as suddenly, 3 loud gunshots rang out. Candy spun around to see both men lying on the ground. She quickly spotted the gun lying nearby, picked it up, and flung it away from herself. Candy couldn't identify who fired the first shot. Rob was shot in the head, stitched up, and questioned by detectives. They found his gun at the scene and asked who it belonged to. Rob said it was his, explaining Emmett and he fought in a parking lot. The gun fell, they struggled, Emmett shot Rob, and Rob couldn't recall who fired the fatal shot due to his wound. Detectives wondered if Emmett might have fired first, since he ended up dead. Since the shooting took place in the Walgreens parking lot, the detectives turned to the security footage for answers. Upon reviewing the footage, they noticed Rob Hall arriving in the parking lot at 9:55 p.m. 1 minute later, Rob was seen entering the Walgreens store, seemingly searching for someone as he rushed through each aisle. The security footage captured Rob exiting the Walgreens at 10:06 p.m. and parking his car beside Candy's vehicle. He then waited there for the next few minutes. Approximately 10 minutes later, Emmett's truck appeared on the footage as it pulled into the parking lot. However, the shooting itself was not caught on camera. Candy initially denied being romantically involved with her boss, but rumors among their co-workers suggested otherwise. According to their co-workers, Candy and Rob were seen frequently spending time together in his office with the door closed, just 3 weeks after she was hired. On the day Emmett was shot, detectives made a curious discovery. Emmett had accompanied Candy to the public defender's office to discuss divorcing Rob. During the investigation into Emmett Corrigan's murder, crime scene investigators searched his vehicle in the parking lot and found steroids in the glove compartment. This discovery wasn't a surprise to many of Emmett's loved ones, as he had been heavily focused on bodybuilding and his behavior had changed, leading some to suspect he was using steroids. When Candy gave her statement to the detectives, she described a specific pattern of shots that suggested Rob shot and killed Emmett twice before turning the gun on himself and shooting himself in the head. This evidence was enough for the detectives to obtain an arrest warrant for Rob Hall, charging him with first-degree murder. As a result, Rob Hall was arrested and charged with Emmett Corrigan's murder. Rob Hall faced severe consequences for his actions. A conviction for first-degree murder would have resulted in either life imprisonment without parole or the death penalty. When Rob Hall went on trial for the murder of Emmett Ashley, Emmett's widow hoped the trial would bring her some closure and help her grieve. She believed that understanding her husband's affair and death would provide her with a sense of closure. According to the prosecution, Rob was enraged by Emmett's affair with his wife Candy and blamed him for ruining his marriage. They claimed that Rob shot Emmett and then attempted to take his own life. However, Rob's defense team presented a different account. They argued that Emmett was the aggressor on the night of his death and had a history of abusing steroids. The defense alleged that during the altercation, Emmett grabbed Rob's gun, shot Rob, and then Rob regained control of the weapon and killed Emmett in self-defense. Candy Hall, the wife of Rob Hall, was a key witness in his trial. Her testimony during the trial differed slightly from the account she provided to the police, on the night of Emmett's death. On the witness stand, Candy claimed to have heard a distinct sequence of shots, stating that there was an initial pop, followed by 2 more quick pops. This revised account supported the defense's argument, which suggested that Emmett had shot Rob Hall first, before Rob managed to regain control of the gun and shoot Emmett twice, resulting in his death. Prosecutors needed to prove Rob, not Emmett, was the Walgreens shooter. They presented forensic evidence that the murder weapon leaves significant gunshot residue, GSR, after firing. Tests showed Rob had 32 GSR particles on his left palm and 23 on his right, while Emmett had 1 on his left hand and none on his right, proving Rob fired the gun. After careful consideration, the jury found Rob Hall not guilty of first-degree murder. However, they did reach a unanimous decision that he was guilty of second-degree murder, meaning the murder was not premeditated. The judge presiding over the case sentenced Rob to 30 years in prison, and he will be eligible for parole in 2028 when he is 58 years old. Despite being convicted, Rob has consistently claimed innocence and appealed his conviction in 2021. However, the Idaho Supreme Court upheld his conviction, denying him a retrial. 2 months after Emmett's murder, Candy Hall was arrested and charged with embezzlement for allegedly stealing from her previous employer, an attorney. These embezzlement charges were unrelated to Emmett's murder. Instead of facing the original embezzlement allegations, Candy pleaded guilty to the lesser charge of grand theft and received a prison sentence. She was released on parole in 2014, but remains on probation until 2026. Candy Hall spoke candidly on Dateline, overcome with guilt about the incident's harm to her relationships with her kids. She's unsure how to move forward, hoping to prove to them it was a regrettable mistake. Ashley's life was shattered when her husband Emmett was murdered by his lover's husband. She bravely confronted Emmett's lover on Dr. Phil in 2015. Refusing to be defined by grief, Ashley rebuilt her life by leaving the past behind and starting anew. She moved to a new town, and her 5 kids slowly rediscovered happiness. Ashley found love again, remarried, and had 2 more kids. Now she uses her blog to support others who've endured trauma. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Pam Hupp. Pam Hupp was born on October 20th, 1958 in Delwood, Missouri, as the second child to the Newman family. She married Mark Hupp, and they had 2 children together. In 2001, the family relocated to Fallon, Missouri. Pam had a varied work history, eventually working as administrator for State Farm until 2010, when she stopped working due to back and leg pain. During this time, she started filing disability claims. On August 16, 2016, around noon, Louis Gumpenberger, a mentally challenged man who had been struggling with mental and physical disabilities since a car crash in 2005, died after being shot 5 times by Pam Hupp in her apartment. Earlier that day, Pam called 911, reporting a robbery. According to Pam, Gumpenberger had jumped out of a vehicle driven by another person, attacked her with a knife while she was in her SUV, and she claimed she slapped the knife away with a karate chop. Pam said she then ran into her house, grabbed her Ruger LCR from the nightstand, and shot Gumpenberger 5 times in self-defense. She alleged that Gumpenberger ordered her to drive him to the bank to withdraw Russ's money, and claimed that Gumpenberger attacked her in her driveway. Russ was Russ Faria, a man wrongly convicted of murdering his wife Betsy in 2011. At the crime scene, the police found 9 $100 bills on Betsy's body, along with a handwritten note addressed to her. The note contained chilling instructions for the killer, detailing what they needed to do at Pam's apartment. Firstly, they had to retrieve Russ's money. Then they would take Pam into the house, kill her, and make it look like Russ's wife was responsible. The murderer wanted Pam's life to end in a specific way. They even specified that the knife should be left sticking out of her neck. They were willing to pay Gumpenberger a hefty sum of $10,000 for completing the task. Pam Hupp was arrested for murder. However, truth behind Gumpenberger's death emerged when Pam voluntarily visited O'Fallon police. During her interview, Pam asked if it'd be recorded, citing her TV appearances with KTVI's Chris Hayes, whom she blamed for attracting criminals. According to the Fallon chief of police and the prosecuting attorney of St. Charles County, Pam had lured Gumpenberger into her home by posing as a television producer named Kathy. She pretended this was for a TV show and tricked him into reenacting a 911 emergency call, providing a perfect cover for the horrific crime she was about to commit. After murdering Gumpenberger, Pam wrote a note that was later found on his body. The police were convinced that Pam was a ruthless killer due to the overwhelming evidence they discovered, including the $100 bills found on the deceased body. It was later revealed that Pam had planted these bills on Gumpenberger's body. Significantly, the 10th $100 bill was found in Pam's dresser, and its serial number was sequential with 3 of the other $100 bills found on the body. The St. Charles County Police subsequently reopened a complaint filed on August 10, 2016, by Carol Alford, who reported a woman matching Pam's description. This woman had approached Alford, offering to pay her $1,000 to participate in a fake 911 call, and was driving an SUV identical to Pam's. It emerged that Carol Alford was not the only one with a similar complaint. Brent Harleton informed the police that Pam had made him the same offer less than an hour before she shot Gumpenberger. Pam claimed in her interview that she had never met Gumpenberger before, but phone records showed that she had been at his doorstep. Further investigation revealed that Pam owned the knife she claimed Gumpenberger used to attack her, which she had purchased along with other items at a store in O'Fallon. It was also discovered that Pam had a habit of storing her knife between her kitchen counter and stove, similar to how the knife was found in her car, wedged between the passenger seat and central console. During a search of her home, police found a carpet swatch that seemed to be placed to protect her rug from Gumpenberger's blood. The police had doubts about Gumpenberger's ability to commit the crime due to his mental state. It became clear that Pam was guilty when she shot Gumpenberger, apparently trying to protect her rug from blood. On August 23, 2016, Pam Hupp was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and armed criminal action. When she was arrested, she asked to use the restroom and then attempted to take her own life by stabbing her wrist and neck with a ballpoint pen. Fortunately, she failed. Pam made her first court appearance on January 30, 2017, where St. Charles County Assistant Prosecutor Phil Groenweg argued that her actions demonstrated a consciousness of guilt. Pam Hupp was convicted on all charges by a grand jury in December 2016 and was given a $2 million bail. Her trial began in 2017, during which she pleaded not guilty, prompting the prosecutor to seek the death penalty. They argued that she had made a decision to target Gumpenberger as her victim. In June 2019, Pam entered an Alford plea, effectively withdrawing her request for a jury trial and avoiding the death penalty. Following her guilty plea, she was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole in August 2019. After her sentencing, Pam called her then-husband, Matt Hupp, and admitted to killing Louis Gumpenberger to spare their family the ordeal of a distressing trial. The trial exposed a disturbing aspect of Pam's character, revealing a shocking truth that horrified the police, judges, and the entire nation. In June 2016, Judge Cunningham ruled that evidence related to the brutal murder of Betsy Faria could be presented in court, leading to the reopening of the Betsy Faria case. Betsy Faria, born Elizabeth K. Meyer Faria, resided in Troy, Missouri, where she worked alongside Pam at State Farm as a life insurance administrator. In 2010, Betsy was diagnosed with cancer, and by October 2011, she had discovered that it had spread to her liver, leaving her with only a few months to live. Prior to her death, on December 22, 2011, Betsy altered the sole beneficiary of her $150,000 life insurance policy, replacing her husband, Russ Faria, with Pam Hupp, without informing him or their daughters of the change. Pam later claimed that Betsy had instructed her to establish a trust fund for her daughters until they came of age. However, Pam subsequently alleged that Betsy had wanted her to keep the money for herself, citing a previously undisclosed romantic relationship between the two women before Betsy's death. Betsy's daughters became suspicious and took Pam to court in 2014, but their attempt to retrieve their mother's life insurance fund from Pam and her husband Matt was dismissed by the court. In 2016, Russ took legal action against State Farm. 5 days after Betsy made Pam Hupp the sole beneficiary of her life insurance policy on December 22, 2011, Betsy attended a chemotherapy session at the Alvin J. Siteman Cancer Center, which left her weakened. Afterwards, she went to her mother's house as planned, where Russ was supposed to pick her up, or she would stay overnight. However, Pam Hupp unexpectedly arrived at Betsy's mother's house and offered to drive Betsy home, claiming she dropped her off around 7 p.m. Betsy's daughter later stated that her mother missed her call at approximately 7:21 p.m. By 9:40 p.m., Russ made an emergency call to 911, frantically reporting that his wife Betsy had taken her own life. Russ spent the evening at his friend Michael Corbin's house, watching movies from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Afterwards, he drove to Arby's Lake in St. Louis before heading back home. When Russ called for help, the first responders arrived about 10 minutes later. Upon examining the scene, they immediately ruled out the possibility of suicide. Betsy's body was found lying on her right side, with 55 stab wounds and a wrist cut to the bone. A kitchen knife was lodged in her neck, and another knife was discovered under her pillow. Notably, there were no bloodstains or footprints near the entrance of the house. The estimated time of Betsy's death was determined to be between 7:20 p.m. and 9:41 p.m. Fingers pointed to Russ Faria as the main suspect after his wife's murder. Authorities believed he had a motive due to being denied $150,000. Russ was arrested a day after the murder and charged with first-degree murder, despite claiming innocence. A pair of blood-stained slippers were found in his closet, and he failed a polygraph test. The police deemed his demeanor suspicious and erratic. Russ's bail was set at $250,000, which he couldn't pay, so he was jailed until his November 18th trial. Pam told police Russ was violent, a heavy drinker, and had threatened Betsy before. With a $150,000 motive, it was easy to suspect him. Russ's trial was an extremely challenging and brutal process. According to his lawyer Joel Schwartz, Russ maintained his innocence, stating that he was with friends on the night in question, and they corroborated his alibi. Furthermore, Russ had purchased food from a store, making it practically impossible for him to have committed the crime in question. The prosecutor countered that Russ's friends were in on it, lying about his whereabouts and maybe even helping him. The judge, Christina Menem, refused to let Schwartz present evidence pointing to an alternative suspect, Pam, despite strong evidence of her motive and suspicious behavior. She claimed to have put $100,000 from insurance into a trust fund for her sister's daughters, but later admitted to keeping it for herself. She didn't want others to have it, so she implied she wanted someone else to have it. A detective reported a crime scene camera malfunction, causing key photos to be lost. Despite the odds, Russ was convicted of murder and armed criminal action, sentenced to life plus 30 years. Before Russ's retrial, her lawyer obtained the photos showing no blood trail. He's still trying to find out who sent them to him. Betsy Pam's case took a welcome turn during re-examination. At trial, her sister Camp testified that Russ was devastated when his wife removed him from her insurance policy. Russ had pressed a pillow to Camp's face. Russ's friends were accused of being accessories to murder, but no charges were filed. After 4 years in prison, Russ's attorney appealed the conviction in 2015. However, a judge rejected a review of the case in 2013. In 2014, KTVI and the St. Louis Post-Dispatch reinvestigated the case, unveiling suspicious facts about Betsy's death and the killer's identity. Pam Hupp's alibi was discredited due to contradictory statements, and it was revealed she lied about not being in the Furia home. The fact that Pam was completely forgotten about in the murder case was not only shocking to Schwartz and Russ, but some members of the Lincoln County Sheriff's Department had also been confused as to why Pam was not being investigated as a possible suspect in the case. In an interview, an officer had shared how shocked he was when no one was looking in Pam's direction. Everyone had been fixated on Russ. Media exposed prosecuting attorney ASI's effort to imprison Russ, revealing her relationships with the captain of investigations Mike Lang and a lead investigator prosecuting witness. This led to a retrial in 2015 with a new judge, Christina Menem, initially presiding. After Menem's recusal, Judge Stephen R. granted a new bench trial and released Russ on bond. Schwartz presented evidence against Pam, revealing she told police she saw Russ with another man. CSI agent Amy Buhner believed Russ's blood-stained slippers were planted evidence. Russ was acquitted in 2015 and later sued ASI and deputies for ignoring exonerating evidence and fabricating their own. Russ was surprised by the speedy exoneration. Russ won a $2 million settlement in 2020. ASI faced a bar complaint from Joel Schwartz, but it was rejected in 2016. In 2017, ASI cooperated with the U.S. Attorney's review of Betsy Faria's case and asked for an independent probe into her conduct, but was cleared of any wrongdoing. Judge Christina Menem was suspended in 2017 for misconduct. She and ASI were later voted out for mishandling the Betsy Faria murder case. In 2019, Lincoln County appointed Mike Wood as the new attorney, who reopened the case, inspired by Russ Ferris's wrong conviction. After Pam Hupp's Alford plea, Wood requested a review by the major case squad. The case also motivated Rick Harold to run for Lincoln County Sheriff in 2020. Pam Hupp was questioned as a suspect in Betsy Faria's murder in July 2021. She was charged with first-degree murder and armed criminal action. The prosecutor sought the death penalty due to the brutal nature of the crime, which included 55 stab wounds and a severely cut wrist. Evidence against Pam included a $150,000 life insurance policy, which she claimed for herself despite promising to put it in a trust fund for Betsy's daughter. Pam Hupp claimed she and Betsy were lovers in 2021 and that Betsy wanted more than friendship. She betrayed Betsy, saying Betsy had a crush on her. Prosecutor Mike Wood thought Pam murdered Betsy, stabbing her 55 times with a kitchen knife while she slept. Pam then used her socks to spread footprints, trying to appear as domestic violence. Pam Hupp's case file linked her to Betsy Faria's murder. Despite claiming to be home by 7:20 p.m., Pam's call records showed she was still at Betsy's. Betsy's body position suggested she was killed by someone she trusted. Pam pleaded not guilty in 2022, but her trial was delayed due to her attorney's death. It's now set to begin in 2025 and last about a month. Prosecutor Mike Wood thought the case against Pam Hupp was mishandled from the start, with bias against Russ Faria in his second trial. A 2015 destruction order could have erased key evidence, luckily overlooked, ensuring Faria's release. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Mary Catherine Higdon. Mary Catherine Higdon, born in 1994, was a lively child who spread joy wherever she went. Her infectious laughter and humor brought delight to those around her, often with her quick wit and impressive impersonations. She loved taking leisurely strolls around town with her pet frog perched on a shoestring, proudly showing it off to everyone. From a young age, Mary had a deep appreciation for nature and animals, spending hours exploring the outdoors and marveling at the beauty of the natural world. Aside from being an entertainment enthusiast, Mary had a passion for performing. She would often stage plays for her family, captivating them with her creativity and boundless imagination. As she grew older, Mary was introduced to firearms and developed a strong interest in them. She learned the importance of handling guns responsibly, respecting their power and potential. Over time, her skills improved and she became an accomplished marksman with a growing passion for guns. Mary Catherine met her soulmate, Stephen Freeman, in high school. Born on January 1st, 1995, in Griffin, Georgia, Stephen grew up in a close-knit family with his parents and brother. He was a happy child with many friends who described him as laid-back, kind, and helpful. Stephen's family was very important to him, especially his mother, with whom he shared a special bond. He loved spending time outdoors, enjoying activities like hiking, camping, fishing, and hunting. Mary Catherine and Stephen quickly formed a strong connection in high school, united by their shared passion for the outdoors. Their love for nature brought them together, and their relationship flourished as they explored the great outdoors, whether hiking, camping, fishing, or hunting. This connection served as the foundation of their deep and enduring relationship. Mary Catherine and Stephen's high school graduation marked the start of a new era in their lives as a couple. They decided to take their relationship to the next level by moving in together in a house in Griffin, Georgia. The couple was ecstatic about having their own space and starting a new life. Mary Catherine had become an integral part of Stephen's family, with his mother treating her like a daughter. She welcomed Mary Catherine into their family with open arms, and the couple felt grateful for her love and support. Every Sunday, Mary Catherine and Stephen would visit Stephen's parents for a big family dinner. This weekly tradition brought the family closer together and solidified Mary Catherine's place within it. Over time, Stephen's friends also grew to appreciate Mary Catherine. Initially, they had reservations about the couple's relationship, but as they spent more time together, they realized how well-suited the pair were. They admired how Mary Catherine brought happiness and joy into Stephen's life and shared his passion for the outdoors. Stephen, a metal worker, repaired roofs. His wife, Mary Catherine, had two jobs: part-time teacher's assistant and sales at a sporting goods store, where she learned gun safety from coworker Thomas Skinner. This complemented Stephen's passion for firearms as an avid hunter and target shooter with multiple guns, including a Glock 42 at home for protection. By summer 2018, Mary Catherine and Stephen had been in a 5-year relationship in Griffin, Georgia. Tragically, it came to an end on August 1st. That day, Mary Catherine made a frantic 911 call, screaming that she had accidentally shot Stephen. When police arrived at their apartment, they found Mary Catherine in a state of distress, crying and hyperventilating over Stephen's motionless body. Despite his still being alive with a chest wound, Mary Catherine was screaming that she couldn't lose him. An ambulance rushed Stephen to the hospital, where doctors made efforts to save his life. But unfortunately, he eventually succumbed to his injuries. Mary Catherine visited the police station to explain the shooting incident. She claimed that she had accidentally shot Stephen while handing him a gun, which he normally kept beside his bed for protection. However, the police officers detected the smell of alcohol on her breath and noticed discrepancies in her account, which shifted from handing the gun to tossing it. The police were skeptical, knowing that a tossed gun would not fire on its own, and the nature of the wound suggested that Mary Catherine had deliberately pointed the gun at Stephen. During the interview, Mary Catherine eventually confessed that she had acted out of anger. Although the police had recorded the interview, there was only feedback during the crucial moment when she admitted to shooting Stephen out of anger. Nevertheless, despite the missing recording, the police were convinced that they had collected sufficient forensic evidence to prove that Mary Catherine had intentionally shot her boyfriend Stephen. At the apartment of Mary Catherine and Stephen, police found evidence of a heated argument before Stephen was shot. Scattered food suggested a prior altercation. This was the 6th time police had been called to the residence in the past year due to domestic disturbances. Despite Mary Catherine's claims, the gun used in the shooting was found to have been loaded that night. Traces of grease on the gun and magazine led the police to conclude that Mary Catherine, who was cooking dinner at the time, had loaded the weapon after shooting Stephen. Stephen's friends told police their relationship was marked by frequent arguments, possessiveness, and verbal abuse from Mary Catherine. Friends saw her as mentally unstable, causing tension. When Stephen tried to distance himself, she'd bombard him with texts and calls, forcing him to block her. One friend revealed Mary Catherine pulled a gun on Stephen multiple times, but he didn't report it, fearing trouble for her. Stephen's friends were stunned when they learned that Mary Catherine had accidentally shot him, especially since they knew she was familiar with firearms. However, what they were unaware of was that 3 months earlier, Stephen had confided in a friend that Mary Catherine had a disturbing episode where she ran around outside, screaming at the top of her lungs, and even attempted to shoot both him and herself. Furthermore, just a month before the incident, Stephen had shared with another friend that although Mary Catherine had previously threatened him with a gun, this time her eyes had a look that genuinely terrified him, making him believe she might actually carry out her threat. Stephen's friends told police he'd been tired of Mary Catherine's behavior and planned to leave her after 7 years. He intended to move away without telling her, fearing her reaction. On July 30th, 2018, Stephen sent Mary Catherine a friendly text, but the next night, he ignored her calls and texts after a fight. Mary Catherine was cooking dinner when she noticed Stephen was missing. She called his mom, who said he was with a friend. Enraged, Mary Catherine drove to the friend's house to confront him. When she arrived, she saw Stephen in the truck and began yelling at him. He tried to calm her down, saying he was heading home. Stephen's friend said Mary Catherine pulled a gun on him multiple times, but she denied it. She admitted threatening suicide with a gun, though. His mom believed Mary Catherine's threats kept Stephen from leaving, fearing she'd harm herself if he did. Mary Catherine said Stephen escalated the situation, becoming violent, throwing dinner in her face. She claimed self-defense, grabbing a gun to scare him off, but he lunged at her, and as she backed away, she saw he was bleeding from the chest. At the time of the shooting, Mary Catherine didn't share her account of events with the police because she was too embarrassed to reveal that Stephen had a history of violence towards her, including hitting her in the past and being controlling. In fact, she claimed that on one occasion, he kicked her out of bed so forcefully that her head hit the door frame. However, Stephen's friends described their relationship differently, saying they had seen Mary Catherine hit Stephen, including an incident where she slapped him hard in the face. By contrast, Mary Catherine's sister offered a different view, stating that 2 weeks before the shooting, she had seen bruises on Mary Catherine's arm. Mary Catherine's sister said Mary Catherine confided in her about Stephen's physical attack. The police investigation found Stephen's death was a murder. Mary Catherine was arrested and charged with murder and other crimes. She refused a plea deal and chose to go to trial, claiming she shot Stephen in self-defense to protect herself from his aggression. A year after Stephen's death, Mary Catherine's trial began, revealing the tumultuous nature of their relationship. Her defense team argued that she acted in self-defense, citing Stephen's history of aggressive and abusive behavior as justification for her actions. To support their claim, they presented evidence to the jury that demonstrated Stephen's controlling, manipulative, and dangerous nature, which had led Mary Catherine to fear for her safety. Mary Catherine testified tearfully about years of abuse by Stephen, recounting a disturbing pattern of physical, mental, emotional, verbal, and sexual mistreatment. She described his attacks, belittling, and disregard for her humanity, saying his abuse knew no bounds, leaving her trapped and terrified. Mary Catherine's defense presented a text from Stephen, saying he'd punish her when he got home. Mary Catherine testified that meant physical abuse, and if she defended herself, he'd hit her harder. Another text shown in court read, "Don't hit me, or I'll hit you back 2 times harder." Mary Catherine testified that Stephen had a red room, like in 50 Shades of Grey, where they had aggressive and violent sex. She provided a text from Stephen saying, "You're going to the red room," to back her claim. Mary Catherine also alleged Stephen assaulted her twice, once after a Disney World trip, saying she felt uncomfortable with their increasingly aggressive sex and asked him to stop. But he intensified his efforts, claiming she owed him for gifts. The defense presented text messages from Stephen to support Mary Catherine's abuse claims. These messages were vulgar, threatening, and showed a pattern of verbal assaults. Over 60 pages of messages showcased Stephen's abuse, including one disturbing message where he held a dead fish, captioned, "This is you." Another message presented to the court was one from Stephen after Mary Catherine cheated on him, in which he wrote that he was going to wreck her for wrecking him. Furthermore, the defense alleged that Stephen had a drug and alcohol addiction that contributed to his violent outbursts. Mary Catherine said she broke up with Stephen, not the other way around. She claimed he got angry and threatened her, so she grabbed a gun in self-defense. Her last words to him before firing were, "Get out of my house." Stephen's friends and family disputed Mary Catherine's claims that he was violent and abusive, knowing him as friendly and caring. His mom denied knowledge of disturbing texts and threats, but claimed he only said hurtful things out of anger. Mary Catherine was questioned about not reporting Stephen's alleged abuse. The state also pointed out she searched for violent, explicit images online hours before the shooting, claiming she did it to please Stephen. The state argued she'd changed her story about the shooting at least 10 times since her initial interview. Evidence in court included a text from Stephen to Mary Catherine, saying she'd previously pointed a gun at him, and his friends testified about witnessing her abuse towards him, supporting the state's claim that she was violent towards him, not the other way around. Jurors deliberated for 4 hours before acquitting Mary Catherine of malice murder, felony murder, and lesser charges. Shocked family and friends expected a guilty verdict, but jurors later revealed they believed Mary Catherine intentionally killed Stephen. However, they couldn't prove it beyond a reasonable doubt due to lack of evidence, making it hard to distinguish murder from self-defense. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Brooke Skylar Richardson. The Richardson family consisted of Kim and Scott Richardson, who were devoted parents actively involved in their children's lives. Their son Jackson was passionate about football, while their daughter Brooke Skylar, or simply Skylar, was a cheerleader. Skylar struggled with an eating disorder, which had taken over her life from a very young age. Her mother, Kim, first became aware of Skylar's eating habits issues when she was in the 6th grade at just 12 years old. Skylar's fixation on food and exercise became increasingly apparent, such as when she refused to buy gum if it had more than 5 calories. As a flyer on the cheerleading squad, Skylar felt pressured to maintain a certain weight, which made her struggle even harder. Her obsession with her body image and the constant fear of gaining weight had consumed her. Skylar's battle with weight and body image started when she was a cheerleader. To stay at a certain weight, she began throwing up after eating. However, this harmful habit made her problems worse. After the cheerleading season ended, Skylar's struggle with her weight got even harder. She would have times where she ate too much food in a short time, known as binge eating, and then times where she would hardly eat or follow very strict diets. Skylar's parents saw the change in her behavior and were worried about her health. They tried to talk to her about it, but Skylar would shut them down whenever they brought it up. She didn't want to discuss it, and any attempt to talk about her weight was met with resistance. Frustrated, Skylar's parents looked for professional help from doctors and therapists, hoping they could help their daughter. After an evaluation, Skylar was diagnosed with body dysmorphia, a condition characterized by an obsessive focus on a perceived flaw in appearance, often leading to significant distress and impairment in daily functioning. In the summer of 2016, just before her senior year, Skylar started dating her friend's cousin. However, the relationship was short-lived, and by January 2017, she had moved on to a new boyfriend, Brandon, a high school student. At this time, Skylar seemed genuinely happy and was gaining weight. Her parents, Kim and Scott, were hopeful that her eating disorder was under control as they noticed her healthy appearance and genuine happiness. In February, Skylar chose her prom dress, a tight-fitting one that required her to be laced into it. A month later, in mid-March, Skylar went on a family vacation, during which she wore a two-piece swimsuit. Her mom, Kim, thought she looked great. Kim, aware that Skylar and Brandon were getting close, wanted Skylar to start taking birth control pills, believing this would protect her daughter's health and prevent unwanted pregnancies. In mid-April 2017, Skylar visited her mother's gynecologist to get a birth control prescription. Kim waited outside the doctor's office while Skylar met with the doctor. After leaving the examination room, Skylar emerged in tears. Kim immediately asked her daughter why she was so upset, and Skylar replied that it was a traumatic experience. Unbeknownst to Kim, the real reason behind Skylar's tears was that the doctor had informed her that she was approximately 8 months pregnant. Skylar asked the doctor to keep the news secret, as she wasn't ready to share it with her loved ones. 9 days after the incident, Skylar, who was heavily pregnant at the time, attended her prom with her boyfriend Brandon on May 5th. Despite her advanced pregnancy, Skylar was able to fit into her prom gown. 2 months later, on July 14, 2017, the police arrived at the Richardson home. They informed Skylar's parents, Kim and Scott, that they needed to speak with Skylar about something she may have witnessed. The police reassured the parents that Skylar was not in any trouble and took her at their word. Scott decided to drive Skylar to the police station, unsure of what would happen when they got there. The police wanted to ask Skylar some questions about a call they had received from a doctor who specializes in women's health. This doctor's office had reported that one of their patients, a young woman, had given birth to a baby and then buried the baby in her backyard. When they arrived at the police station, the police took Skylar into custody and put her in a room where they would ask her questions. Skylar's father was not allowed to be in the room with her before the interview started. The police then read Skylar her rights and told her about the call they had received from the doctor's office. According to the caller, on April 26th, Skylar had gone to the doctor's office and found out she was pregnant. But when she went back to the office, she told the doctor that the baby was not alive and that she had buried it in her backyard. During her police interview, Skylar confessed to giving birth to a stillborn baby girl on May 7, 2017. She revealed that she had delivered the baby in her bathroom, where she discovered the infant wasn't breathing and had no heartbeat. Skylar felt compelled to bury the baby and opted to keep the incident a secret. Without making a sound, Skylar went downstairs, fetched a small garden shovel, and dug a shallow grave in her backyard. She buried the baby, marking the spot and preserving the memory of her child. Skylar placed a vase with a flower at the burial site. After questioning Skylar, the police informed her parents, Kim and Scott, about the true reason she was brought to the station. Kim and Scott were stunned to learn their daughter had been pregnant, as they were completely unaware. Kim was devastated upon hearing the news, saddened that her daughter had endured this ordeal alone. Skylar told her parents she had named the baby Annabelle and said the father was a cousin of a close friend, someone she had briefly dated. Then, crime scene investigators arrived at the Richardson home to search for the baby's remains. The investigators carefully searched the area, removing weeds and brushing the ground to uncover any hidden evidence. Despite the overgrown vegetation, they thoroughly examined every inch of the area. After clearing the weeds and brushing the ground, the police found several bones, including parts of the skull. They carefully collected these remains, placing them in small body bags to preserve any evidence they might hold. The investigators took great care to handle the bones gently, ensuring they remained intact. One investigator recalled that the remains had a strong odor, while another investigator acknowledged that the bones were extremely small, making it challenging to distinguish them from rocks. The coroner confirmed the discovery of hair and tiny fingernails, but no organs or other recognizable features. After being questioned for over 5 hours, Skylar and her parents were permitted to return home. However, 6 days later, the police contacted Skylar, requesting her presence once again. They reassured her father, Scott, that she was not in trouble. During the subsequent interview with Skylar, the police revealed that they had received new information from the coroner's office that contradicted her initial account. The medical examiner who analyzed the remains claimed to have found evidence suggesting that the baby's bones may have been subjected to fire. Skylar was taken aback when the police told her that her baby had been burned. She strongly denied starting a fire, insisting that she would never harm her child. However, the police were convinced that Skylar was guilty of killing her baby girl and trying to destroy the evidence by burning her remains. They suggested that Skylar might have tried to cremate the baby's body to get rid of it, but this idea only confused Skylar further. She remained adamant that she hadn't burned the baby. But then Skylar changed her story. She told the police that she did have a lighter and might have used it to try to cremate her baby's remains. She also revealed that the baby might have been born alive, as it had made a sound, possibly even cried, on one occasion. Skylar admitted to holding the newborn too tightly, which might have contributed to its death. During a 1-hour interrogation, the police collected enough evidence to arrest Skylar on a charge of reckless homicide. They believed that Skylar had suffocated the baby. After presenting their case to a grand jury, Skylar was eventually indicted and arrested for aggravated murder, a charge that carries a mandatory life sentence in Ohio. At her arraignment, Skylar pleaded not guilty to the additional charges of voluntary manslaughter, abuse of a corpse, and putting children in danger. She spent the weekend in jail until her family could secure a $50,000 bond. Following the tragic death of her child, Skylar found herself at the center of a fierce media storm. From the moment her name was made public, the public judged and scrutinized everything she and her family did. The constant judgment and scrutiny had a severe impact on their well-being, leading them to retreat to the safety of their own home. However, even there, they received threats that made it difficult for them to venture outside, and the public would take pictures of them, further fueling the frenzy and adding to the immense pressure they faced. The public scrutiny became overwhelming, affecting every part of their lives. Although Skylar's defense attorneys thought she had given a false confession and the baby's death was an accident, the prosecution refused to change their approach. Despite new evidence that didn't support their first conclusion, they continued with their case. A key piece of evidence was the medical examiner's initial report, which said the remains were burned. However, after re-examining the evidence, the medical examiner withdrew this statement, saying there was no proof of burning. Even with this new information, the prosecution didn't change their approach. They focused on Skylar's admission that she had tried to cremate the remains, even though the evidence didn't support their theory of a burned body. This showed the state's determination to get a conviction, regardless of the evidence. Skylar's family endured immense stress and fear from public scrutiny and threats, making daily life unbearable. Her defense team worked tirelessly to prepare her case. Though they raised $50,000 for bail, Skylar's release came with an ankle monitor, keeping her mostly homebound and isolated. Over a period of 12 months, Skylar's life underwent a drastic change. She had to put her plans to attend the University of Cincinnati on hold while she waited for her trial, having been accused of murdering her baby. The charges against her were severe, and her defense team filed a motion to have the trial transferred to a different county. However, the request was denied, which meant Skylar had to face the trial in the original jurisdiction. Skylar felt overwhelmed by her situation, struggling to cope with the emotional toll of the allegations and feeling isolated. Her dogs became her main comfort, providing companionship as she awaited trial. Despite the challenges, her family stood by her, believing in her innocence and supporting her fight for freedom. In July 2019, the state made an unexpected offer to Skylar's defense attorney. The offer was that if Skylar pleaded guilty to the remaining charges, which had a 15-year sentence, the state would drop the charge of aggravated murder. Skylar's parents were torn about this decision and wondered if she should take the deal. After thinking it over carefully, Skylar decided to reject the plea deal. This decision scared her parents, who questioned whether she had made the right choice, but they knew it was her decision to make, not theirs. On September 3, 2019, Skylar stood trial for the murder of her newborn daughter. In their opening statements, the prosecution presented a text message Skylar had sent to her mother, in which she expressed happiness and mentioned that her belly had already returned to its normal size, just a few hours after giving birth. The prosecution argued that this message, along with others she sent to her mother and boyfriend within 24 hours of the baby's death, suggested that Skylar was relieved about the baby's death, and pointed to these texts as evidence that she was involved in the baby's death. The prosecution also alleged that Skylar had searched online for how to get rid of a baby, and that her mother, Kim, had warned her that her life would be over if she became pregnant, which had apparently frightened Skylar. According to the prosecutor, Skylar was determined to keep her pregnancy a secret, and when she could no longer conceal her daughter, she took her daughter's life. During the trial, the doctor who performed the autopsy on Skylar's baby testified. She concluded that the baby died from a violent homicide, but couldn't determine if the skull fractures occurred before or after death. Instead, she based her opinion on Skylar's statements during the police interrogation. Skylar's defense attorney questioned the doctor's findings, suggesting she may have been influenced by confirmation bias. The attorney argued that the doctor had already formed an opinion and wasn't likely to change it during cross-examination. The doctor acknowledged that she didn't examine the baby's remains under a dissecting microscope. The attorney asked if she had consulted an obstetrician, and she replied that she hadn't. The attorney also asked if she had looked at photos of the burial site or Skylar's backyard, and again, the doctor said she hadn't. A fetal medicine specialist, another doctor, testified in the afternoon session of Skylar's trial, primarily under questioning by the prosecution. The doctor questioned the claim that Skylar's baby was stillborn, pointing out that there was only one screening and that measurements of fundal height during the third trimester of pregnancy have a 60% margin of error. The doctor also noted that Skylar had reported feeling her baby move, which is not possible for a deceased baby. Furthermore, the doctor expressed skepticism about a report filed by a doctor for the defense, which suggested that Skylar's baby likely had growth issues. During cross-examination by Skylar's attorney, the doctor was asked if he was being paid by the prosecution. He explained that he received $5,000 per day, which is the cost to his practice when a doctor is absent. In the courtroom, the prosecution presented their case against Skylar, revealing shocking and heart-wrenching evidence. The most impactful pieces of evidence were the pictures of the deceased baby's remains displayed on the television screen. Skylar's reactions during the trial, when the pictures of her baby's remains appeared on the screen, showed the lasting impact these images had on her. Initially, Skylar stared straight ahead, avoiding eye contact with the photos, seemingly unable to bear the sight. This stoic demeanor was in contrast to her behavior the previous day, when she visibly trembled as the judge sat down before jury selection. Skylar's defense team presented their case, arguing that her life was far from perfect, even before the murder accusation. They claimed that the prosecution's evidence consisted of half-truths, and that some texts presented in court were taken out of context. The defense team argued that Skylar's frequent use of informal texting language did not necessarily mean she committed the crime of murdering her daughter. They highlighted Skylar's mental health struggles, specifically her long-standing battle with an eating disorder that began when she was 12. The team presented evidence that Skylar regularly saw a psychologist and nutritionist to manage her condition, and showed the jury photos of Skylar at different weights and appearances, including when she was extremely thin and when she appeared slightly heavier. Skylar's defense attorneys highlighted that despite her physical condition, she had cradled the baby for hours while bleeding on the bathroom floor, demonstrating her strong commitment to comforting and caring for the lifeless body after enduring extreme pain. The attorneys told the court that Skylar had planned to inform her family about her pregnancy, but unfortunately, she never got the chance, according to her doctor. Skylar was told she would give birth within 8 to 10 weeks, so she assumed she would have enough time to attend the prom and graduate from high school before discussing the situation with her mother, whom she knew would be unsupportive. During the defense, an obstetrician testified that the baby was stillborn. He argued that since Scott didn't admit to cutting the umbilical cord, it's possible it detached before or during birth. The doctor also pointed out that Skylar's description of the baby's pale appearance was notable, as newborns are usually a purplish color, indicating they're healthy. Additionally, the obstetrician stated that Skylar's weight gain of only 15 pounds throughout her pregnancy was minimal, and suggested that her eating disorder may have restricted the baby's development in the womb. This testimony aimed to raise questions about the accuracy of Skylar's statements to the police regarding the baby's well-being. The defense argued that Skylar had been selective in what she told the police during her interrogation, omitting any harmful behavior towards the baby, and that her testimony lacked credibility. They suggested that other factors might have contributed to the baby's death. After a one-week trial, the jury deliberated for 4 hours before delivering a verdict. Skylar was acquitted of aggravated murder, involuntary manslaughter, and child endangerment. However, she was found guilty of abuse of a corpse, a felony carrying a maximum 1-year prison sentence. The judge ordered her to remain in jail until her sentencing hearing, which took place the following day. At the sentencing hearing, Skylar apologized for her actions and acknowledged the seriousness of her mistakes. The judge was unsympathetic, rebuking Skylar for her role in the tragic loss of her baby. He emphasized that better decisions during her pregnancy would have saved her child's life. The judge's words were stern and unyielding, making it clear that Skylar's choices had devastating consequences. After expressing his dissatisfaction with Skylar's behavior, the judge sentenced her to 3 years of probation for abusing a corpse. This sentence served as a reminder that her actions were both morally wrong and illegal. In November 2020, Skylar's lawyers asked the judge to end her probation 2 years early, and the request was granted. During the hearing, Skylar said she wanted to return to a normal life and didn't need a probation officer to supervise her anymore. The judge acknowledged her progress and agreed that the probation department no longer needed to devote resources to her case. The judge emphasized that probation is not just about punishing or rehabilitating someone, but also giving them a chance to show why they shouldn't be sent to prison. Since being found not guilty, Skylar has made the most of her second chance. She has finished 2 semesters of college and has been working part-time at the law firm that defended her. Although she was cleared of all charges, Skylar has encountered difficulties in finding more employment due to her being on probation. However, she remains resolute in pursuing her career ambitions and has shown an interest in going to law school to become a public defender. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Ryan Poston. Ryan Poston was born on December 30th, 1982, in Fort Mitchell, Kentucky, to Lisa and Jay Poston. He had a strong and loving bond with his 3 sisters, Allison, Catherine, and Elizabeth, throughout his life. Growing up, Ryan had the opportunity to travel extensively and attend schools in Switzerland and the Philippines. This exposure broadened his horizons and gave him an adventurous spirit. Ryan was also known for his striking good looks, which, coupled with his charismatic personality, made him stand out in a crowd. After graduating from high school, Ryan attended Indiana University, where he earned a degree in political science, history, and geography. He excelled academically and graduated with honors in 2005. Following in the footsteps of his family members, Ryan pursued a career in law. He enrolled in the Salmon P. Chase College of Law at Northern Kentucky University. Driven by his admiration for the legal profession, his esteemed grandfather and uncle, both practicing attorneys, were his role models. Ryan's ultimate goal was to own a successful law firm. While in Cincinnati, Ohio, Ryan dedicated himself to helping people who couldn't afford expensive lawyers. Despite being young, he had already built a strong reputation, and many sought his advice. He worked hard to ensure everyone had access to fair and competent legal representation, regardless of their financial situation. After a painful breakup in 2011, Ryan turned to his cousin Carissa for comfort and support. During a visit to Lexington, Kentucky to spend time with her, he met Shayna Hubers, a Lexington native, and his life took an unexpected turn. Shayna Hubers embodied the quintessential Southern girl, renowned for her outgoing personality and effortless ability to form friendships. Her warm and charming demeanor naturally drew people to her. After graduating high school in 2009 with a full scholarship, she continued her education at the University of Kentucky, majoring in psychology, before pursuing her master's degree in psychology at Eastern Kentucky University. Despite their 8-year age gap, Ryan was 29, while Shayna was just 21. Their feelings for each other grew increasingly undeniable. With each visit Ryan made to see his cousin Carissa in Lexington, he found himself devoting more time to Shayna. As they spent more time together, their bond deepened. Shayna began spending more time in Highland Heights, the Kentucky suburb where Ryan lived. Every weekend, she would pack a bag and visit Ryan's home, dedicating herself to taking care of him, cooking his meals, and cleaning his living space. As time went on, Ryan and Shayna's relationship grew stronger, and he took her to meet his parents. She was over the moon with excitement, telling her friends all about Ryan and even saying she wanted to become Mrs. Ryan Poston. But their promising future came to a tragic end on October 12, 2012. In a panicked call to the police, Shayna admitted to fatally shooting her boyfriend, Ryan. The details she shared revealed a devastating scene of domestic violence that had spun out of control. According to Shayna, Ryan had tried to physically abuse her, dragging her out of the house when she attempted to gather her belongings. She told the 911 dispatcher that Ryan had confronted her with a gun, leading to a physical fight. In the heat of the moment, Shayna managed to grab the gun, but she was intimidated by Ryan's size. In a state of panic, she pulled the trigger, ultimately shooting Ryan. Shayna admitted that she believed Ryan's death was inevitable, so she claimed she wanted to end his suffering. She told the 911 dispatcher that Ryan was in distress, making unusual sounds, which motivated her to shoot him several more times. Afterwards, she revealed that she left the gun on a bookshelf. Minutes after Shayna called 911 to report that she had shot her boyfriend, officers were sent to the scene. When they arrived, they told Shayna to come out of the apartment with her hands up. At first, she was hesitant, but she eventually followed their orders. As she walked out, they told her to lie face down on the ground. It was clear that Shayna was very upset as she complied with their instructions. After the officers handcuffed Shayna and put her in the back of their patrol car, they entered the apartment and found Ryan Poston's body on the dining room floor, covered in blood. Crime scene investigators arrived and examined Ryan's condo, which looked a bit messy, but nothing out of the ordinary for a 29-year-old man. They found that Ryan had a concealed carry permit and owned weapons, including the Sig Sauer semi-automatic gun that Shayna used to shoot him. Based on the evidence they gathered, the investigators concluded that Ryan was sitting at the table when Shayna opened fire. They knew this because of the blood found on the table. However, the fact that several items on the dining room table were not disturbed raised doubts about Shayna's story. If there had been a fight, the items would have been disturbed. The crime scene investigators thoroughly searched Ryan's apartment, gathering every detail. At the same time, police officers questioned Ryan's neighbors to see if they had any information that could help the case. One of Ryan's neighbors, a woman named Nikki, spoke to the detective and provided some useful insights. Nikki knew Shayna well and thought that Shayna was more committed to Ryan than he was to her. According to Nikki, the couple often had loud, angry arguments that disturbed the neighborhood. Nikki remembered a specific incident several months ago when Shayna came to her door in tears, saying she was afraid of Ryan. Shayna had told Nikki that she and Ryan had a violent fight, during which he lifted her up and threw her down the hallway, causing her injuries. Nikki believed Shayna and encouraged her to report the abuse to the police, but Shayna decided not to take legal action. At the police station, detectives took Shayna to an interrogation room to question her about the shooting of her boyfriend, Ryan. Before starting the interview, the officers read Shayna her Miranda rights, reminding her that she had the right to have an attorney present. Shayna chose to exercise this right and asked for a lawyer to be present. While waiting in the interrogation room, Shayna filled out some paperwork under the supervision of a detective. Despite having asked for a lawyer, Shayna still chatted with the detective. When asked who the victim was, Shayna calmly replied that it was the man she had killed. This response showed a clear lack of emotion, as it was obvious she knew the victim was Ryan, her long-term boyfriend. Shayna remained in the interrogation room with the detectives, maintaining that she had acted in self-defense. She recounted the events of the previous night, describing how Ryan had allegedly grabbed her by the throat and violently thrown her around the apartment. At some point during the investigation, the detective temporarily left the room, replaced by another officer. Shayna began to reveal more details about her encounter with Ryan to this new officer. She alleged that Ryan had been extremely aggressive prior to the shooting, hurling insults at her, calling her crazy, and taunting her while brandishing a gun. Shayna believed that Ryan's behavior that night was fueled by drug use, which contributed to his violent outbursts. Throughout the interview, Shayna consistently stuck to her version of the events that culminated in the shooting. She claimed that Ryan was sitting at the dining room table, handling ammunition for his Sig Sauer pistol, when she noticed him staring aggressively at her from across the table. At that moment, she became aware of his intentions and realized he was trying to evict her from his condo. Shayna confessed to picking up the gun and firing it in the midst of the chaos, hitting Ryan with a single bullet. Shayna continued to describe the incident, claiming that after shooting Ryan once, she saw him twitching. Believing it was necessary to end his suffering, she fired multiple shots, ultimately killing him. In her confession, Shayna told the detective that Ryan was vain and had mentioned wanting a nose job, so she decided to grant him his wish. She deliberately aimed her gun at his face and pulled the trigger, essentially giving him the rhinoplasty he had requested. During the intense interrogation, Shayna expressed deep concerns about the impact of the incident on her academic performance and her future romantic relationships. She confided in the detective that having a dead boyfriend would make it difficult for her to find someone to marry, especially if they discovered she had killed him in self-defense. Despite her statement, the detective arrested and charged her with Ryan's murder. Shayna seemed genuinely surprised by her arrest, maintaining that she had acted in self-defense. In 2015, Shayna's trial began, and the courtroom was filled with anticipation. The prosecutor compared Shayna to Jodi Arias, who had also been charged with murdering her boyfriend, Travis Alexander, emphasizing the striking similarities between the two cases. This heightened the tension in the courtroom as everyone awaited the outcome. The prosecutor argued that Shayna was fixated on her ex-boyfriend, Ryan. According to the prosecution, Ryan dominated Shayna's thoughts, and she constantly discussed him. During the trial, the prosecutor presented testimony from Ryan's friends, who described his plans to end the relationship with Shayna and his efforts to avoid her phone calls and messages. Despite this, Shayna continued to visit Ryan's condo in Highland Heights uninvited, including on the night of the murder. The prosecution introduced evidence that Ryan had scheduled a date with Audrey Bolt, a former Miss Ohio, on the night of the murder. This information supported the prosecution's theory that Shayna was driven by jealousy and anger towards Ryan's potential new love interest. Audrey Bolt testified that she was supposed to meet Ryan for drinks at a bar on the night of the murder, but he failed to appear. It wasn't until later that she learned of his murder. The prosecution also presented evidence that Ryan had repeatedly expressed his desire to end the relationship with Shayna in the days leading up to his death. Ryan had sought advice from his father, Jay, on how to handle the situation, and Jay had counseled him to be kind to Shayna to avoid a messy breakup. However, it appears that Shayna continued to exert control over Ryan on the day he was killed. The prosecution presented evidence of several text exchanges between Ryan and Shayna, in which Ryan clearly told her he did not want to see her that weekend because he had other commitments. Nevertheless, Shayna showed up uninvited at his condo, which was not unusual for her. The argument that ensued reached a boiling point when Ryan explicitly told Shayna their relationship was over and she could no longer control him. Prosecutors argued that this statement enraged Shayna, prompting her to pick up a gun and fatally shoot Ryan. During Shayna's trial for murdering Ryan, the prosecution showed a video of her being questioned by the police to suggest she was a cold-blooded killer. In the video, Shayna's calm behavior and responses seemed to back up the idea that she had intentionally taken Ryan's life. The footage showed her dancing and singing along to music, which seemed unusual for someone who had just killed their loved one in self-defense. Normally, people in such a situation would be distraught and crying due to the loss of life and the weight of their actions. The prosecution's goal in showing the video was to make Shayna appear detached and unemotional, implying that her actions were not those of someone who had acted in self-defense. They claimed that her lack of tears and carefree behavior proved her guilt. However, this interpretation was open to debate and up to the jury to decide. In the end, the video was a key piece of evidence in the prosecution's case against Shayna, but it was just one part of the evidence presented during the trial. Shayna's defense team stuck to a clear storyline throughout her trial, arguing that Ryan was the aggressive and violent one on the night of the incident, leading Shayna to shoot him. To back up this claim, they built a picture of Ryan's mental state, suggesting that a mix of drugs he was taking, including anti-anxiety medications and amphetamines, contributed significantly to his behavior. The defense team presented the jury with autopsy results showing the presence of these drugs in Ryan's system, strengthening their argument that the drugs influenced his actions. An expert toxicologist testified for Shayna, stating that a combination of drugs like anti-anxiety medications and amphetamines could cause someone to become violent and paranoid. This testimony aimed to provide a reasonable explanation for Shayna's actions, implying that she may not have intended to harm Ryan. During Shayna's trial in April 2015, the prosecution grew increasingly worried that she might be acquitted due to being a smart, young, and attractive woman, and that her self-defense claim might persuade the jury. However, on April 23rd, the jury delivered a guilty verdict, convicting Shayna of murdering her boyfriend, Ryan Poston. At the August 2015 sentencing hearing, Shayna persisted in shifting the blame for Ryan's death onto him, which infuriated his friends and family. Despite the overwhelming evidence presented during the trial, Shayna stuck to her claim of innocence and refused to acknowledge her role in the events. Under Kentucky law, a defendant who is deemed a victim of domestic violence can be eligible for early parole after serving just 20% of their sentence. However, the judge in this case ruled that Shayna did not meet the criteria, characterizing her crime as a premeditated murder. As a result, the judge handed down a 40-year prison sentence, making Shayna eligible for parole in 17 years, when she will be 41 years old in 2032. Shayna Hubers was sentenced, but she appealed for a new trial, which was granted by a judge in August 2016. The reason for the appeal was that one of the jurors had failed to disclose their felony conviction, which is against Kentucky law since felons are not allowed to serve on juries. Following a 4-month delay, Shayna's second trial for the murder of Ryan Poston began in August 2018. During the opening arguments, Shayna's defense attorney claimed that throughout her year-and-a-half-long relationship with Ryan, Shayna tried her best to make him happy. However, their romance suffered because of it. The attorney stated that on the very first night Shayna and Ryan met, he was violent toward her, both physically and sexually. This incident had a lasting effect on her, and it took her several weeks to respond to his messages after that. Shayna's defense lawyers claimed that her high school experience of sexual assault led to a history of alcohol abuse and promiscuity. They argued that this traumatic event contributed to her behavior on the night of the murder. The defense team aimed to create a sympathetic image of Shayna, highlighting her troubled past and arguing that she was not responsible for her actions on the night of the murder. They sought to challenge the prosecution's narrative, suggesting that her behavior was the result of a combination of factors, including a history of abuse and a toxic relationship with Ryan. The defense portrayed Shayna as a victim of domestic violence at Ryan's hands, rather than as a cold-blooded murderer. They claimed that her actions were driven not by a desire for revenge or financial gain, but by years of abuse by her former partner. According to the defense, Ryan constantly criticized Shayna about her weight and chest size, pressuring her to enlarge her breasts. This constant pressure contributed to her low self-esteem and feelings of inadequacy, the defense argued. The defense claimed that Ryan and Shayna's sexual relationship was troubled, marked by frequent disagreements and frustration from both parties. According to the defense, Ryan yearned for a more romantic and intimate connection, but this desire was not fulfilled, leading to a growing rift between them. To support this claim, the defense presented evidence that Shayna had sought an injection to improve her romantic life, which was meant to address the couple's sexual difficulties and strengthen their bond. However, the defense argued that Ryan's consistent rejection and disinterest worsened the strain on their relationship, causing Shayna to become increasingly frustrated and isolated. Moreover, the defense alleged that Ryan often broke up with Shayna, only to engage in conversations with other women. In contrast, the prosecution stated that while Ryan Poston was not a perfect boyfriend, he was not abusive. They argued that Shayna did not act in self-defense when she fatally shot Ryan, but rather because he had ended their relationship that night. The prosecution claimed that it was time for Ryan to break up with Shayna, as she refused to leave him alone despite the breakup, demonstrating her inability to move on from the relationship. One of Ryan's co-workers testified that the breakup between Ryan and Shayna would be permanent this time because Ryan had always avoided breaking up with Shayna in person. According to the co-worker, Shayna had made every effort to keep Ryan. The prosecution presented text messages in which Shayna told her friends that she and Ryan's romantic encounters had brought them closer together. However, Shayna testified that these encounters had actually driven them apart. In another text message exchange, Shayna asked Ryan for sex, but Ryan was taking antidepressants, which had reduced his sex drive due to the medication's side effects. However, when Shayna testified, she claimed that Ryan had forced her into sexual intercourse. After 5 hours of deliberation, the jury found Shayna guilty of murdering Ryan despite contradictory testimonies and conflicting evidence. During the sentencing hearing, Shayna's mother emotionally addressed the judge, sharing stories of her daughter's singing talent, which had earned her multiple college scholarships. Through tears, she begged the jury to consider granting Shayna parole, arguing that her daughter still had the potential to positively impact people's lives. The mother acknowledged, however, that her pleas did not minimize the grief and pain experienced by Ryan Poston's family. Shayna was given a life sentence with no chance of parole. As part of her sentence, She must serve at least 17 years before becoming eligible for parole in 2032. She is currently serving her sentence at the Kentucky Correctional Institute for Women in Pewee Valley, Kentucky. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of the Buchanan family. Molly met Adam Buchanan, a divorced father of one, when she applied for an office manager position at his company. At the time, Adam was raising his son Nolan from a previous marriage on his own. Molly, a cheerful and sociable blonde, immediately caught the attention of the company owner, and the interest was mutual. They started a romance, which turned into a serious relationship, and Molly eventually moved in with Adam. Molly, who dreamed of a loving and friendly family, made an effort to build a strong bond with her stepson Nolan. Soon, she became pregnant, and they had a son named Gavin. Those who knew the Buchanans described them as a close-knit family of four. Adam, who owned a construction company, earned a comfortable living, and the family even purchased a vacation property in El Dorado County, California, a small cabin on 19 acres in Greenwood. The cabin was rustic with no electricity, water, sewer, or gas. But Adam, being in the construction business, actively worked on remodeling it, and the family frequently visited the cabin. On September 13, 2015, at 10 a.m., the Garden Valley Fire Department responded to a wildfire in Greenwood Township, western El Dorado County, on Highway 193 between Coloma and Georgetown. Upon arrival, they found that the fire had destroyed 10 acres of the property, and the cabin had burned to the ground, with charred remains in the ashes. The fire department personnel left the scene untouched. At 11 a.m., firefighters alerted the El Dorado County Sheriff's Office to the fire scene, unsure of what they were dealing with. Initially, they suspected a pet might be trapped inside the house. However, upon arriving, the coroner faced a challenging situation. The house was still smoldering, making it impossible to inspect the interior. They had to wait for the flames to die down and the temperature to decrease. Once the coroner could examine the house, they detected the pungent smell of burnt flesh and soon discovered a human skull and charred torso. It became apparent that the tragedy had claimed a life. The officer called for backup, and additional officers from the sheriff's office arrived to conduct a meticulous investigation of the scene. The evidence led to an obvious conclusion: the isolated cabin, located in a remote area, was not the primary residence of its owners, but rather a vacation retreat. A Dodge truck and trailer were found on the adjacent property, and running the license plates could identify the owner. It was possible that the owner was the wildfire victim. It was quickly discovered that the vehicle and trailer belonged to Buchanan Construction, a company owned by Adam Buchanan. Buchanan, the owner, lived 160 miles away from the accident scene, a 3-hour drive from Bonita, California. This information supported the police's initial assumption that the house served as a country retreat for city dwellers who vacationed there to escape the hustle and bustle. It remained unclear who was inside, the company's owner, Mr. Buchanan, or someone else. The detectives began their investigation with the owner's name as their first clue. The Bonita police officer's task was to verify that all of Buchanan's family members were safe and at home. At the correct address, the officers arrived at the Buchanan's driveway, where they noticed a white Ford pickup truck. When they knocked on the door, Adam's 16-year-old son from his first marriage answered, looking surprised, and asked what had brought them to his doorstep. To avoid alarming the household, the officers decided to first establish who was present in the house. They didn't want to assume that the company car's disappearance was necessarily linked to the owner himself. It could have been taken by someone else from the company. Nolan Buchanan informed the officers that his father, Adam, had left for the weekend to his country estate, 160 miles away, with his partner Molly and their 8-year-old son Gavin, and they were expected to return in the evening. According to Nolan, his father had entrusted him with taking care of the house. Although the remains found in the cabin were not yet confirmed to be those of the Buchanans, The information gathered and the discovery of 2 sets of remains by the evening of September 13th were enough to declare the family missing. The El Dorado County Police visited Nolan's home on September 14th to question him further and determine who had perished in the fire. However, they were met by Adam's parents, Howard and Susan Buchanan, who explained that their son, the cabin's owner, regularly visited the property to perform his own repairs. The parents were extremely worried, having been unable to contact their son or daughter-in-law until then. The officers learned that the house relied on generators for power, but it had no electricity at the time of the incident. The presence of gas cylinders inside the cabin led to 2 possible theories. The fire could have been either an accident or intentional. By Sep 15th, investigators collected evidence, including debris from a nearby fire pit, which changed the case's direction. A skull with a bullet hole was found, revealing a homicide, not an accidental fire. Forensic DNA testing showed the bullet was lodged in the victim's thigh. The skull belonged to a child, making murder the primary focus. The fire was intentionally set to destroy evidence. Next, investigators sought to determine the circumstances. Burglary gone wrong, family suicide, or a grudge against Adam Buchanan of Buchanan Construction? Investigators pursued the theory that Molly's murder was a crime of passion, examining her life for enemies and her marriage for clues. As leads dried up, they focused on the troubled relationship, marked by abuse, sleeping apart, and intense arguments. Molly's mother feared they'd kill each other, yet Molly stuck with Adam, briefly fleeing with their son. The couple enjoyed hunting near home, where guns were common. Police suspected another fight escalated. One spouse shot the other, then took their own life. However, an inconsistency emerged. If the tragedy was caused by a conflict between the husband and wife, logic dictates that the instrument of the crime would be found near the remains of one of them. But this was not the case. Investigators theorized that the weapon might have been damaged in the fire, making it less conspicuous than expected. Over 5 days, forensic team members meticulously sifted through the ashes in the home, conducting a meticulous search. Despite their thoroughness, they did not find the expected result. No weapons were discovered in the house. By this time, the forensic examination results were in. The examination confirmed that the DNA of the bodies matched Adam Buchanan, Molly McAfee, and their 8-year-old son. All 3 victims had suffered gunshot wounds prior to the fire, and the angle of the bullet wounds ruled out the possibility of suicide. The lack of firearms suggested that a 4th person, unknown until then, was present in the house, shot the Buchanans, and the investigation had to start anew. Police had no option but to turn to 16-year-old Nolan, the son of the deceased. Nolan informed the officers that his family had driven away in an old Dodge truck. According to Nolan, his father chose to use the company vehicle instead of his personal Ford, which was parked in the driveway, because the truck and trailer were already loaded with rocks to decorate the area around his country cabin. This was the truck that police found near the burned structure. When questioned about why he didn't accompany his relatives on vacation, Nolan reiterated that he had to stay behind to take care of the house and garden while his father and stepmother were away. Nolan also mentioned that there was a neighbor growing illegal marijuana on the edge of the Buchanan property, which had led to frequent arguments between his father and the neighbor, with his father demanding that the neighbor stop planting it and threatening to report the issue to the police. When discussing the family business, Nolan revealed the company's financial struggles, including downsizing and a significant reduction in employees from what his father had mentioned. The business debts were accumulating rapidly. The investigation now had valuable information and a suspect, specifically a neighbor, given the common link between violent crime and illegal drug cultivation in that area. The detectives believed the threat of reporting to the police could have led to the murder of Buchanan and his family. However, the issue was that they didn't know which neighbor they should focus on. After the family's murder, the financial crisis engulfing their business had to be addressed. On September 18th, the police visited Adam's company and questioned the employees. As Nolan had warned, the company was in dire straits, teetering on the brink of bankruptcy, with debts exceeding $30,000. As a result, some employees lost their jobs. Interestingly, some of the fired employees were bitterly unhappy with their dismissal and could potentially be suspects in the crime. During a community cleanup, students found a purse with Molly McAfee and Adam Buchanan's IDs and a .22 caliber rifle hidden nearby. This led detectives to a new theory. The killer used the rifle and took their documents to cover tracks. The discovery was crucial because it suggested that the killer had gone to great lengths to reach Greenwood, murder the family, and then return to Bonita to get rid of the evidence. This suggested that the killer was likely a local resident of Bonita. The fact that the evidence was found near the location of Buchanan Construction reinforced the theory that the boss was killed by a disgruntled employee. Detectives sent the gun and the bag of documents to be examined and requested a warrant to search the company's records and premises. Here, during the search, they discovered a video surveillance camera installed on the firm's premises, which was directed not at the company's territory, but at the center of the parking lot. Since it was known that the family had gone out of town on Friday, the investigators reviewed Friday's footage and were surprised to find that Adam had attached a trailer filled with rocks to a white Ford F-150, not a Dodge truck as Nolan had initially told them. This discovery revealed that Adam had deliberately misled the investigation. If the white Ford had towed the rock trailer to the cabin, then someone must have driven it back and parked it in the driveway of the Buchanan family home. Investigators decided to re-interview Nolan, aiming to keep him safe while gathering as much information as possible. This time, they asked him specific questions, such as what movie he had seen at the cinema, how he had paid for shopping at the mall, and how he had paid for dessert on a date. Unaware of the implications, Nolan mentioned that he had used his father's credit card. The officers then applied for a warrant to search the Buchanan home in Bonita, search their vehicles, and examine their financial records. The Ford automobile sat in the driveway, its wheels caked with reddish soil, similar to that found in Greenwood. This suggested that the car had recently been driven on the dirt roads of Greenwood. If the Ford had been used for a trip earlier, some soil might have remained on the wheels, but it wouldn't have been as noticeable. Unfortunately, the fire had destroyed any wheel tread marks near the country house, but the dirt buildup indicated that the car had probably been to Greenwood recently. Further investigation revealed that Adam Buchanan had used his credit card on Friday, September 11th, at a Taco Bell fast food chain on his way to Greenwood. However, Nolan claimed he stayed home and didn't accompany his parents, and that he had the credit card in his possession. Detectives reviewed the security cameras at the diner and saw what they expected: a white Ford, not a truck. When they searched the Ford, they found a Taco Bell receipt dated September 11th that listed 4 drinks, not 3. Similarly, evidence collected at the scene of the fire pointed to 4 drink cups, indicating that Nolan had been in the car. On Saturday, September 12th, Adam and Molly used a credit card at the Valencia Club Bar in Penin, about 30 minutes from the cabin. This was a familiar spot for the couple, as they would often stop by after working on the cabin. Security cameras at the bar recorded the time they left, and traffic cameras on the highway helped track their route back to the cabin. The cameras showed that a Ford F-150, driven by Adam and Molly, headed towards the Buchanan cabin around 2:30 a.m. on the day of the fire. Then at 3:30 a.m., the same vehicle was spotted driving in the opposite direction, but this time with only Nolan inside. Later that morning, on Sunday, September 13th, Adam's credit card was used to make purchases at 3 different businesses in Bonita: Starbucks, McDonald's, and a gas station. The bank confirmed that Adam only had 1 credit card, which contradict Nolan's previous statements. By the time the forensic results were back, Nolan's fingerprints were found on the gun, leading to his arrest in the middle of a high school class. Nolan Buchanan maintained he was not guilty of the charges against him, and instead, he spun a tale claiming his father had shot the family, then pointed a rifle at him. Nolan said he took the weapon away in self-defense, accidentally shooting his father in the process. Nolan attributed his subsequent actions, including setting the house on fire, to a state of panic and extreme fear. Throughout the trial, the defense emphasized Adams' history of abuse towards Nolan and other family members. However, the medical examiner questioned the verdict due to the inconsistent angle of the bullet wound on Gavin's skull, suggesting it was fired at nearly a 90-degree angle. Nolan countered that he and his brother's beds were adjacent, and they were both awakened by the noise and screaming. He claimed to have seen someone enter the bedroom and shoot Gavin, then pointed the rifle at him. According to Nolan, he pushed the attacker away, which would have resulted in a shot fired at around a 45 degrees angle, contradicting the forensic evidence. The prosecution's theory is that Nolan killed his brother when they were alone in the house, while their parents were out at a bar. After waiting for his father and stepmother to return, Nolan shot and killed them as well, as evidenced by the position of the bodies. The sequence of events suggests that Adam was killed first, followed by Molly. Next, Nolan took the rifle, his parents' papers, doused the bodies with gasoline, and set the house on fire. He then went home, met up with his girlfriend, and spent the day with her, thereby establishing an alibi for himself. On July 13, 2018, a jury delivered a guilty verdict on 3 counts of first-degree murder against Nolan. As a result, he was sentenced to 150 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 25 years. In announcing the sentence, Judge Kingsbury acknowledged the verbal and physical abuse Nolan had suffered, as well as the testimony that he killed his brother to spare him from further suffering at their father's hands. However, she also highlighted the premeditation of the crime, the subsequent arson, the creation of alibis, and Nolan's plans to take over the family business, which he had shared with relatives. The judge referenced Nolan's failure to comply with rules and erratic behavior, as reported by staff at the South Lake Tahoe Juvenile Treatment Center, where he was sent following his arrest. The judge informed Nolan that he, like anyone, has the opportunity to reform, and that if he exhibits good behavior, he may be eligible for parole in 25 years. Despite this, Nolan maintains his innocence, and if he is eventually granted parole, he will be required to pay a substantial amount of compensation to the victims, the exact sum of which has not yet been determined. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Ellie Costile. Alexandria Coastal, known as Ellie, was born on September 11, 1997 in St. Louis. As a blonde-haired girl, she grew up with the care and love of her parents, Cindy and Keith, who supported her endeavors. Ellie excelled academically and in sports like track and field and golf. Her dream was to attend the University of Mississippi, and she became a student there, living in a dormitory in Oxford, and being popular among her peers. Friends and relatives described her as a lively and energetic person. Summer on campus is quiet, with few students remaining. Those who stay attend extra lectures or prepare for next year, then unwind at local bars and nightclubs in the evening. Ellie Costile, an upperclassman, stayed to improve her knowledge, and having just passed a key exam, was planning to celebrate with friends. A popular spot among young people in Oxford Square is a small bar that serves pizza and drinks. Its lively atmosphere, complete with dim lighting, loud music, and a colorful selection of drinks, makes it a place where the bartenders know many customers by name. On the evening of July 19th, Ellie met up with friends at this bar, where they chatted and had a good time. Despite her efforts to have fun, Ellie seemed tense and spent most of the evening texting someone on her phone. After having a couple of cocktails, she discreetly left the bar. This would be one of the last times Ellie Costile a University of Mississippi student, was seen in public. On July 20th, 2019, around 10:30 a.m., police officers stumbled upon a young woman's body near an abandoned fishing camp by Sardis Lake, about 30 miles from the university, during their routine patrol. The victim had been shot 9 times in the back, and investigators found 11 shell casings at the scene. A purse containing a driver's license and a student ID belonging to 21-year-old Alexandria Costal, a University of Mississippi student, was found nearby on the roadside. Ellie's death shocked the University of Mississippi community. Her father confirmed the news on Facebook, saying police told them Saturday that she'd been a crime victim. Witness interviews established that a few days before the incident, Ellie's parents had visited her from St. Louis, during which she expressed her enthusiasm for the upcoming academic year at the university, with no reservations about staying on campus for the summer. Moreover, data from her Apple Watch revealed that following a phone conversation with her mother, Ellie sent several messages to Brandon. An examination of these messages revealed that 3 months prior to the incident, Ellie had confided in Brandon about some shocking news. Since Brandon was the last known person to have communicated with the victim, he became a person of interest to the police. A closer look at their messages further disclosed that Ellie and Brandon had been in an on-again, off-again romantic relationship. Brandon Theld, a tall, dark-haired young man with an athletic build, was also a student at the University of Mississippi, hailing from Fort Worth, Texas, and raised in a well-mannered family. In 2016, when Ellie met Brandon as a freshman, she fell for him immediately. The young couple started dating, but they never formally declared themselves as an official couple. While Ellie's feelings for Brandon were genuine, he never showed a serious commitment towards her. Ellie's friends knew that her relationship with Brandon was troubled. They frequently argued, even in public. The couple would often break up, only to get back together after a while. On April 12, 2019, Ellie told Brandon that she was pregnant, but he didn't respond. She sent him numerous texts and voice messages, but he ignored her. 3 months later, Brandon finally replied, saying that he didn't want a child because it would ruin his life. He refused to help or support Ellie, telling her to just take a pill or make a doctor's appointment to deal with the situation. Despite being deeply in love, Ellie desperately wanted to talk to Brandon in person, but he kept refusing. On the night of July 19th, Ellie went to a local bar with her friends at 11:52 p.m. Surveillance cameras showed her leaving the bar and taking a taxi home. About 30 minutes later, Brandon called her at 1:58 a.m. on July 20th. Ellie got into a vehicle, unaware that it would be her last ride. She headed to an abandoned fishing camp by Sardis Lake, where Brandon was waiting. The drive to the camp was supposed to take around 45 minutes. Witnesses reported hearing gunshots in that area between 2:15 and 2:30 a.m. On Sunday afternoon, investigators contacted Brandon Theld, requesting him to visit the police station to discuss Ellie Costio. Initially, he made excuses to avoid the meeting, but eventually promised to appear on Monday at 8:30 a.m. However, when Brandon failed to show up at the police station on Monday, July 22, 2019, investigators began tracking his phone's location. The data revealed that he was heading back to his home in Fort Worth, Texas. As a result, authorities issued an alert for his pickup truck. 2 days later, Brandon was finally arrested when he stopped at a gas station in Memphis. Brandon Theld, a 22-year-old, was arrested and charged with homicide in the local area. Despite this, his lawyer and father insisted that he was innocent. As the Oxford community tried to make sense of the violent death of one of their own, the death of Ellie Costio quickly drew national attention. Reporters from all over the country came to Oxford, eager to learn more about Ellie and the person accused of killing her. Brandon Theld maintained his innocence until the end, but the evidence was against him. A gun matching the shooting was found in his possession, along with bloody clothing. He had gone to Texas to get his father's gun, suggesting premeditation. His internet history showed searches for abortion services and ways to avoid punishment for a crime. A letter to his parents revealed his dark thoughts and feelings, where he mentioned that something in him just didn't work, and that he thought it was the end for him. Investigator Jared Bundren shared some previously known details about the shocking crime with the public. He revealed that Ellie had told Brandon she suspected she was pregnant, but Brandon didn't want her to have the baby. This led to numerous arguments between the couple, with Ellie wanting to meet in person to discuss the situation. Brandon refused to meet until the day of the incident. The police wanted to question Brandon and asked him to come to the station for questioning. However, Brandon resisted and made excuses for not being able to come in. Concerned, the police began tracking his cell phone and located him. They found that Brandon was heading to his home in Fort Worth, Texas. Authorities alerted nearby police departments, and Brandon was arrested when he stopped to refuel at a gas station in Memphis. Upon his arrest, the police found blood on him and a pistol in his truck that matched the weapon used in Ellie's murder. Despite Brandon's claims of innocence, the police charged him with the crime. Morgan acted quickly after hearing about the student's death, seeking guidance from administrators. She noted the university's past experiences with student suicides and accidents, but this was a new situation. Morgan briefly addressed Ellie's passing in class, alerted counselors, and allowed students to postpone exams if needed. She expressed sympathy, saying her heart went out to Ellie's parents and friends, stressing that parents shouldn't have to bury their children. As it turned out, Ellie Cotile, in her need for support, had told friends that she was pregnant with Brandon Thell's child. Her sisters knew she was pregnant and that she had told Brandon. A classmate said that he was very upset about it, worrying about how it would ruin his life and future. He was angry that she wouldn't have an abortion, but she said she didn't believe in that. Ellie tried to end her 17-week pregnancy using harmful methods like excessive drinking and substance use. Brandon knew but was seeing someone else. He wanted her to abortion, but she morally opposed it. He was abusive, frequently breaking up with her in anger, then returning apologetic and she'd take him back. Ellie Cotile's shocked friends and classmates struggled to cope with the news and paid tribute to their friend on social media. Her friend Anna Pasco mentioned that it was just hard for her because when she saw Ellie's face, all she could think about was what Ellie went through, what she thought, and what she said. Anna added that it was very, very difficult. On Thursday evening in her hometown of St. Louis, a memorial service was held for Ellie Cotile at the request of the community. However, no public statements were made in Oxford about memorial events. Only black ribbons encircling the majestic white column of the women's houses, including Alpha where Ellie lived, served as a reminder of the tragedy. The young student's demise unsettled the entire state. Despite withholding key facts for investigative purposes, several news agencies conducted in-depth investigations and uncovered surveillance footage of Ellie Cotile near the location where her body was discovered early Saturday morning. The footage, captured on cameras, shows Cotile with a man at a 24-hour store in the Harmontown area. A store's owner revealed that police visited his store on Sunday to review the surveillance footage. However, he claimed that the investigators didn't explain the reason for their visit and took some evidence with them when they left. According to him, the video footage is erased every 72 hours, making it impossible to retrieve the captured footage. The business owner expressed his shock, saying, "We've never had any problems or violent incidents here. This is a small town, it's quiet, everyone knows each other. This is just madness." Lafayette County Sheriff's Office keeps investigation details quiet to ensure the perpetrator is brought to justice, says Coroner Rocky Kennedy, who explains that revealing too much now could jeopardize the case. Kennedy shrugged off intense media scrutiny, saying every case is equally important and gets the same level of attention. Michelle Miller stressed the need to recognize relationship warning signs after Ellie's death, questioning if it could have been prevented. Brandon Theld was charged and sentenced to life, with parole possible at 65, now serving at the Mississippi State Penitentiary. Brandon Theld showed remorse at his trial, apologizing to Ellie Costiel's family and his own for her death. A key piece of evidence was that Ellie was never pregnant, leaving us to wonder why she fabricated it. She seemed to believe the lie, hoping it would win Brandon's heart. Tragically, her loved ones still grieve. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Graciela Garcia. Graciela Garcia was born on October 6, 1971, in Mexico. Her family was working class and they hoped to provide a better future for their children. As a result, her parents decided to move to the United States and eventually settled in Hermiston, Oregon. Graciela was too young to remember the hardships of the move. She attended Umatilla High School, a low-cost school where 66% of the student body was Hispanic. Graciela made friends easily and stood out with her outgoing. She later studied business at Blue Mountain College. However, since she was young, she has had a passion for hairdressing and has had the goal of owning her own hair salon. With passion and hard work, Graciela believed that her plans could come true with the right approach. By February 2006, she had become the owner of Carr's Beauty Salon. Thanks to her talent and charisma, she quickly became famous in society. Moreover, her professional image also contributed to the prestige of the salon. She is passionate about her work and has a deep understanding of new beauty trends. Thanks to that, she always has a loyal customer base. Some of her customers have become close friends and are often invited to her home. She is respected and loved by everyone in town. Her private life is also filled with joy and happiness. She was pursued by many men when she was young, but she only loved one. That man became her first love. They have two beautiful daughters, Annabelle and Gabriella, often called Gabby. However, that love did not last long. The man left the family. It seems that his feelings for her faded over time. Despite becoming a single mother, she did not feel hopeless. Instead, she focused on self-improvement and pursued a degree in cosmetology. After her divorce, Graciela met Romero Sanchez, a regular customer at the beauty salon where she worked. At first, their relationship was just a friendship. However, Romero later asked Graciela out. And she accepted. Gradually, their relationship became closer and deeper. However, when Graciela introduced Romero to her family, they felt uncomfortable because of his cold and distant attitude. Annabelle and Gabby, Graciela's two daughters, tried many times to connect with Romero, but he did not respond. Graciela's children were confused by such behavior, but they attributed it to personality differences. Graciela's partner seemed to be a strange and unapproachable person, which puzzled the people around her. They could not believe that a woman as full of life and fun as her could be so passionately in love with such a dry person. However, they still respected her decision. When Graciela announced her upcoming marriage, everyone showed their support and shared her joy. Especially Annabelle and Gabby, they wanted to see her happy and loved. On the wedding day, guests also noticed Romero's arrogance and conceit. Some thought he seemed too jealous when trying to steal all the bride's attention. When Graciela's young grandchildren came to congratulate the newlyweds, Romero treated them with contempt, making them feel uncomfortable. Afterwards, Graciela's relatives could not hide their true feelings about this man. Annabelle even openly stated that she did not consider him a stepfather and just wanted to maintain a normal relationship like other families. After the wedding, the Graciela family had two more sons, Arthur and Jacob. They moved in together at Graciela's house. Graciela's youngest son, Jacob, noticed that Romero began to act as if he were the sole owner of the house. Initially, Graciela tried to set personal boundaries, but because she did not like confrontation, she quickly gave in to Romero. He was hot-tempered and never gave in or apologized first. To avoid creating tension in the family, Graciela continued to give in to Romero. However, over time, Graciela began to realize that she had rushed into this marriage. In conversations with her relatives, Graciela confessed that she felt constrained and oppressed. Her husband controlled her and did not let her go anywhere alone. Despite this, Graciela never said she wanted to leave this abusive relationship. It seems she still loves him. Graciela's family gradually realized that she had become attached to the wrong man. Romero not only controlled Graciela but also lived off of his wife, much to her family's dismay. Romero was a skilled manipulator, constantly stalking Graciela, controlling her correspondence, and even threatening to break up the friendship between Graciela and her friends. He did not want to let her go anywhere, or sometimes he would show up unexpectedly, as if testing her loyalty. His jealousy became excessive and uncontrollable. She felt ashamed and self-conscious because of his behavior, and as a result, she limited her social life. She only communicated with her family and no longer connected with friends or colleagues as before. This seriously affected her work, as her profession required her to communicate regularly with clients and attend various events. Her friends and colleagues noticed a change in Graciela. She was no longer the cheerful and bright woman she used to be. She looked sad and tired, and she was clearly unhappy. Her children also noticed that she had changed in both her mood and appearance. They saw that she had lost her independence and confidence. After discussing it with each other, Graciela's family agreed that they did not like Romero. However, since he was Graciela's choice, there was not much they could do to change the situation. They could only respect her decision. Other relatives also expressed doubts about Romero, but no one knew how to help her in this situation. Graciela and Romero needed help with their relationship, and Gabby had mentioned this to her mother. However, Graciela believed that she would manage her personal life on her own. In 2018, Graciela decided to move her salon to her home for convenience. However, her family was skeptical as they had not heard about the plan for 12 years. Some customers commented that Romero's constant presence at the salon made them feel uncomfortable. Some people thought that Graciela moved the salon home to solve the problem, but others doubted that the idea came from Romero. However, Graciela was happy about the change and believed that working from home would bring her closer to Jacob and Romero. At the end of the year, she and her husband renovated a room into a beauty salon, completing it in May 2019. The salon closed shortly after, but Graciela's reputation remained intact, and rumors of her reopening attracted many customers, including new ones. Graciela was delighted with her career success, but became increasingly secretive about her personal life. However, after 17 years of marriage, Graciela and Romero decided to separate. Romero always kept in touch with their children and saw them regularly. Graciela and her ex-husband shared custody of their youngest son, while the other children were grown and living on their own, but they still kept in regular contact with their family and participated in family activities. Graciela went through the divorce with a calm and optimistic attitude. After the divorce, Graciela focused on developing her beauty salon and spent her free time taking care of her family and close friends. On the morning of November 9, 2019, Romero visited Graciela's eldest daughter, Annabelle, and reported Graciela missing. According to Romero, Graciela and he had been together the night before. However, when he woke up the next morning, he was surprised to find that she was no longer there. Romero tried to contact Graciela but received no response. Annabelle was shocked by the news and Romero's reaction. He cried and appeared distressed. This made Annabelle feel strange because Romero usually did not show emotions in front of them. Romero also said that Graciela had been acting strangely recently, even hinting that she might have found another man in her life. Annabelle felt that Romero's words were insincere and his tears seemed fake, which made her start to doubt his behavior and worry about her mother. Romero usually avoided communicating with his wife's children. But after a while, he changed and decided to connect with them. After Romero left, Annabelle decided to inform the rest of the family about what had happened. Graciella's family gathers to find out what's happening to her. Graciella's car was parked in the driveway. If she decided to leave Romero, she would definitely use her own car. Another thing that surprised them was the neatness of Graciella's house. Everything was perfectly arranged and in order, far beyond normal. However, this was completely contrary to Graciella's personality and lifestyle, because if she went somewhere, her belongings and accessories would be scattered all over the room. Normally, Graciella would spend a lot of time in front of the mirror choosing her outfit for the day. However, the fact that she went out without any jewelry worried the whole family, and they wondered why. As she walked around the house, Gabby noticed something strange. The large blanket had been put in a washing machine, something her mother never did. The blanket was too heavy and someone else had washed it, apparently Romero, which made Gabby suspicious. Romero did not explain this, saying that he did not pay attention to such details. But then people realized that several important items were missing from the house, including Graciella's passport, driver's license, and cell phone. This raised further suspicions about Romero's actions. On November 11th, Annabelle contacted law enforcement at the police station and discovered something surprising. Although Romero had known about his wife's disappearance since the 9th or possibly earlier, he had not notified the police. Therefore, Annabelle was the first to file a missing persons report to her mother. Another incident raised concerns about Graciella's safety. She asked Gabby to pick her up, but even though Gabby said it would take some time because of the distance, Graciella continued to ask. Gabby was surprised by this unexpected request for help. Graciella explained that everything was fine and that her request was just a result of an argument with Romero. When they met, Graciella appeared relaxed, smiling and asking her daughter not to worry. She believed that arguments between lovers were just a form of renewal in their relationship. However, after they broke up, Gabby remained uneasy and became increasingly worried about her mother. The investigation began after Annabelle contacted the police. This caused the relationship between Graciella's family and Romero to deteriorate. Romero seemed angry that Graciella's family had notified law enforcement about her disappearance. Romero gave an official statement about his wife's disappearance. He said that Graciella either wanted to be alone or that she had moved in with another man and would be back soon. That was his answer every time someone asked. However, the police did not ignore this report. Officers launched an investigation into the missing Graciella's disappearance, considering the possibility that she may have been a victim of a crime. They started by searching her house, where her relatives reported that only a few personal items were missing, without finding any other suspicious signs. The investigation expanded to include interviews with her children, Romero, and other close family members, including her ex-husband. However, no useful information was gathered from these interviews. While everyone expressed doubts about Romero's behavior, he cooperated fully with the detectives, allowing them to search his home, answering questions, providing his DNA, and taking a polygraph test. Despite this cooperation, there was insufficient evidence to prove his involvement in the case. Further investigation revealed that Graciella's phone last sent a signal near a bridge in Washington on November 9th at 12:30 p.m. After that, her phone was turned off. Her bank accounts and social media accounts showed no activity, suggesting that she had not accessed since her disappearance. Hundreds of witnesses were questioned, and all the places she regularly visited were checked, but no one had any information about her whereabouts. The investigators found her disappearance to be highly suspicious, as it seemed she had vanished without leaving any clues. For months into the investigation, the Hermiston Police Department announced that they had found no reliable information about Graciela's last whereabouts. Although Romero had not reported her missing, he was not accused of any wrongdoing. Graciela's family became increasingly frustrated with the lack of progress despite their constant contact with authorities throughout the incident. However, as time passed, these updates became less frequent and eventually stopped, forcing Graciela's children to take initiative and contact the police station themselves to inquire about the status of the case. In an effort to reinvigorate the search, Graciela's family turned to the media in March 2020, seeking public assistance and attention. They hoped that by sharing their story, they might gather new information. Graciela's daughter Gabby was mainly in charge of communicating with the press. She expressed her family's increasing frustration with the lack of progress in the case and criticized the police for not keeping them informed for such a long time. She urged investigators to focus more on finding her mother, Graciela, and to take a closer look at the suspicious circumstances surrounding disappearance. Graciela's family suspected something was wrong, as the condition of her belongings was strange and unusual in her home. However, it was unclear who would want to harm her, as Graciela did not appear to have any enemies. The family also believed that Graciela would not have left on her own, as she would have contacted them to reassure. Posters and flyers describing Graciela were scattered throughout the city in search of clues to the case. Graciela, who is 49 years old, Latina, 1.6 meters tall, 62 kilograms, and with dyed blonde hair. Local residents were also asked to be vigilant and report any information that might help the investigation. Her children were so concerned that they asked for a new detective team to take over the case, as they suspected bias in collaboration with a suspect, Romero, who was acquainted with the original investigators. The Graciela family expressed concerns about several inconsistencies in the investigation, including the fact that Romero's phone was turned off on the day of Graciela's disappearance. Additionally, Romero's calm behavior raised suspicions, as it didn't with the typical reaction expected from someone whose loved one has suddenly gone missing. As a result, the Graciela family demanded that the suspect be arrested immediately. Police Chief Jason Edmiston responded to allegations surrounding Graciela's disappearance, confirming that her case is being treated as suspicious and possibly involving foul play. However, he emphasized that this is just one theory and that the investigation remains impartial, driven by evidence. Edmiston also dismissed claims of social connections between Romero and law enforcement as baseless. Edmiston noted that the spread of misinformation has hindered the investigation. Certain information must be kept confidential, and authorities have sought assistance from the FBI. The police chief expressed frustration over public criticism of the police's actions. Separately, Gabby organized a fundraiser to hire a private detective, a move seen as a critique of the police's handling of the investigation. This perceived criticism suggested that the police were not doing enough to find Graciela. 1 year after Graciela disappeared, her family organized a memorial gathering. Here, friends and people who knew her shared stories about her lively and cheerful personality. They prayed for her safe return, lit candles, and later placed signs outside the police station, urging authorities to continue the search for Graciela Garcia. In September 2023, a major development in the case occurred when Romero Sanchez was severely injured in an attack, and that required surgery. There was speculation that the shooter was Mason Garcia, Graciela's brother. The attack suggests that Graciela's family had become frustrated with the lack of progress in the investigation and took matters into their own hands, potentially leading to further tragedy. The disappearance of Graciela Garcia remains an unsolved mystery, leaving her family in a state of agonizing. This has significantly affected the health and mental well-being of her family. Living without knowing what happened to a loved one can be more challenging than coping with a confirmed loss. It remains unknown whether Graciela is alive or not. Her children continue to hope that the truth will soon be revealed and justice will be served to the criminals. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Tanya McKinley. Tanya McKinley was born on January 25, 1961, in the small town of Milton, Florida. She grew up in a loving family and was very close to her older sister. After graduating from high school, Tanya decided to move to Pensacola, a town about 25 miles away from her hometown. She pursued a career in the medical field. Tanya moved to a new city with her cousin Vanita, and they shared an apartment. After moving in, Tanya met a man named James, and they began dating. They eventually moved in together and had a son, Timothy, in 1983. Although Tanya was happy to be a mother, her relationship with James was troubled. They argued frequently, and about a year after their son was born, they decided to go their separate ways. By the end of 1984, Tanya was temporarily living with Vanita, who was now married with 2 children. Tanya planned to find her own place as soon as possible. On New Year's Eve, Tanya, Vanita, and her husband decided to celebrate at a local bar. They left their children at a late-night daycare. Around midnight, Vanita and her husband were getting ready to leave, but Tanya wanted to stay a little longer. Since the daycare closed at 1 a.m., Vanita agreed to pick up Tanya's son, allowing Tanya to stay at the bar. Before leaving, Vanita asked Tanya how she planned to get home, since they had driven there together. Tanya replied that she would get a ride from their acquaintance at the bar. However, when Vanita woke up on January 1st, she found that Tanya had not yet returned home. At first, Vanita thought Tanya might have slept over with a friend, so she was not too worried. Then, Vanita's mother-in-law arrived with heartbreaking news. Tanya had been found dead around 3 a.m. A Pensacola resident was on her way to the vet with her daughter. While driving, her daughter pointed out a person on the side of the road. Pensacola thought it might be a mannequin, but when she got out to check, she discovered it was a human body. Pensacola immediately returned home and called the police. Upon arriving at the scene, officers found the body of a woman lying in an empty lot beside the road. She had no shoes, her tights were down, and her dress was pulled up. Near the body, a blue towel with what appeared to be bloodstains was found. The police identified the victim as 23-year-old Tanya McKinley. Further investigation led them to discover her shoes and purse nearby, containing identification with her name on it. The body was turned over to medical experts for further examination. Meanwhile, police continued to process the crime scene. They soon discovered that Tanya likely did not die where she was found. There was no significant blood near the body, except for a stain on a towel, and signs on the ground suggested that the body had been dragged to the side of the road. On the towel and Tanya's body, investigators found several clues, including dog hair and a human hair. They suspected that the hair belonged to the killer, and that the killer may have owned a dog. Medical experts determined that the Tanya had suffered a head injury from a heavy object, but her cause of death was actually strangulation. They also confirmed that the Tanya had been sexually assaulted. A semen sample was collected from her body, but at the time, DNA analysis was not yet widely used in forensic science. However, the experts were able to establish that the suspect had type B blood. Police began to develop a list of potential suspects. Police turned their attention to Tanya's ex-husband, James. After talking to Tanya's family and friends, police discovered that James and Tanya had argued frequently before and after the birth of their son. When Tanya decided to end the relationship, James was unhappy and tried to convince her to stay. Police believe that James followed Tanya to the bar on New Year's Eve, leading to a confrontation that ended in murder. They brought James in for questioning, but he denied any involvement in the crime. He also agreed to provide hair samples for comparison. Although experts were unable to extract DNA from the samples, they were able to compare the hairs under a microscope. The results showed that James' hair was significantly different from the hair found on Tanya's body and the towel. As a result, the police temporarily ruled him out as a suspect. Police focused on everyone who was at the bar on New Year's Eve. They asked Vanita if she had noticed anyone acting strangely or aggressively toward Tanya, but she said the evening had gone off without incident. Police also discovered that after Tanya split from her ex-husband, she had started dating a man named Kurt, who was a bartender at the bar where she spent New Year's Eve. Kurt was working the night of the murder. When questioned, Kurt denied any involvement in the crime, claiming he had gone to a New Year's party with friends after his shift. The police reviewed all the testimony and concluded that Kurt had enough time to commit the crime. Based on numerous interviews with people at the bar, the police determined that Tanya was last seen alive at 1:15 a.m., but no one saw her leave. The police also spoke with local residents where the body was discovered. A family reported driving past the scene at around 2 a.m. and were certain that there was no body at that time. This meant that Tanya was killed about 1.5 hours after she was last seen alive. During this time, Kurt was unable to provide an alibi. He volunteered to take a lie detector test, but the results were inconclusive, and further investigation revealed that Kurt's blood type did not match the killer's blood type, as determined by a semen sample. As a result, Kurt was cleared of the crime. Unable to analyze DNA from the killer's semen, and with no witnesses or concrete evidence, police could only assume that the perpetrator likely lived in the area where the body was discovered. The case had been closed for years due to lack of concrete evidence. Timothy, who was only 18 months old when his mother died, was raised by his father and Tanya's family. Together, they kept the truth about his mother's death a secret. When Timothy was 14 years old, he was informed that his mother had died in a car accident. As Christmas approached that year, out of curiosity, he searched his father's closet for his present, and Timothy stumbled upon a shocking letter addressed to television host Montel Williams, written by his father himself. In a letter, Timothy's father wrote asking for help in solving the murder of Timothy's mother, Tanya. The letter included a detailed account of the crime, which was the first time Timothy learned of his mother's tragic fate. Years later, in the early 2000s, police reopened Tanya's case, hoping that advances in DNA technology might help identify the killer. Police sent all available evidence to a lab for analysis. Experts discovered that the blood on a blue towel near Tanya's body came from a man, not Tanya. They created a DNA profile of the unidentified man and uploaded it to the FBI database. But there were no matches. The case was put on hold until 2015, when it was reopened, 30 years after the murder. Through investigation, the police discovered from the FBI's archive database that a person had some similarities with the DNA found at Tanya's crime scene. However, the match was not strong. To investigate further, the police learned about the person's family background and even contacted his relatives for assistance. These relatives cooperated and provided DNA samples for comparison. Unfortunately, the DNA analysis showed that his family was not involved in Tanya's death, leaving the police with no new leads. In 2018, a journalist named Tony Adam became interested in Tanya's case. Tony contacted the police offering help, and the police became suspicious of his involvement. Tony joined the investigation despite having no background in criminal investigations. The police, who had made little progress in the case, hoped that Tony's involvement wouldn't hinder the investigation. In 2019, a year after Tony got involved, police decided to identify the killer's relatives. This time, they enlisted the help of Parabon, a genetic genealogy company, and expanded the search to include primarily the DNA of known criminals. Parabon expanded its search to public genetic databases, which were much larger in scope. Unlike DNA evidence collected from a crime scene, these databases contain DNA samples that people have voluntarily uploaded to find relatives. To find the killer, experts used a process of elimination, carefully analyzing the family trees of potential relatives to identify someone who matched their suspect's criteria. They were looking for a man who was at least old enough to have committed the crime in 1985 and had a connection to the area where the crime was committed. In 2020, police identified a suspect in Tanya's murder. Daniel Wells, 57, had been arrested in the late 1980s for assault and indecent exposure. At the time, he was living in Pensacola, working as a carpenter and living with his wife and children. But to confirm whether Daniel was actually the killer, detectives needed to compare his DNA to the profile they collected from the crime scene. To prevent Daniel from fleeing, the police approached cautiously. They kept watch, waiting for an opportunity to collect a DNA sample from him without arousing Daniel's suspicion. Daniel threw a cigarette butt out of the car window near his workplace. The police collected the cigarette butt and immediately sent it to the lab for analysis. Experts extracted DNA from the saliva on the filter and compared it to the DNA of the killer in the Tanya case. The results were a match. The police eventually identified Daniel as the culprit and arrested him the same day. Despite the DNA test results, the police still tried to get Daniel to confess. They arranged for a patrol officer to stop Daniel's car under the pretext of doing a routine ID check. Detectives then approached Daniel, informing him that he needed to accompany them to the station without providing any further explanation. By withholding information, they intentionally kept Daniel in suspense, allowing them to proceed with the investigation cautiously. The police approached Daniel, informing him that he needed to come with them to the police station without further explanation. During the investigation, the detectives slowly steered the conversation toward Tanya's murder, asking Daniel about his whereabouts on the night of the murder. At first, he claimed to have never seen Tanya. However, when the detectives revealed that his DNA was found at the crime scene, his story began to unfold. As the questioning continued, Daniel's denials became increasingly unconvincing, and he grew more and more agitated. Detectives made it clear that the DNA evidence was irrefutable and that he would face consequences for his actions. As the interrogation continued, Daniel denied his guilt and became increasingly agitated. The police said the DNA evidence was incontrovertible and he would face the consequences for his actions. Faced with the evidence, Daniel finally broke down and began to speak. He and Tanya went to his house, where they had sex after drinking. However, an argument broke out, the argument escalated, and in a fit of rage, Daniel picked up a heavy wooden cutting board and hit Tanya over the head. When he realized she was dead, Daniel panicked and dumped her body in a location where it was later discovered. On his way back, Daniel discarded the Tanya's belongings and returned home. When questioned about the dog hairs found on the Tanya's clothes and towel, he attributed them to his roommate's black Labrador. Contrary to Daniel's claim that Tanya died from a head injury, the medical evidence clearly showed that the cause of death was strangulation. In a possible chain of events, Daniel struck Tanya in the head, but when he realized she was still alive, he resorted to strangling her. The police gathered enough evidence to arrest him for murder. Police then contacted Tanya's family, including her son Timothy, to inform them of the developments in the case. Timothy was deeply moved, thanking the police for finally identifying his mother's killer. 2 weeks after his arrest, Daniel's body was found in his cell. An investigation confirmed that he had committed suicide.